Good evening. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public and board members, the meeting and hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless required by law. This meeting will be recorded by the local scene. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by viewing the Duxbury Government Access channels, Verizon 39 or Comcast 9. Viewers can also visit https://thelocalscene.media/Duxbury for information about Duxbury programming, including streaming and watching replays on Duxbury YouTube. With that, I call this meeting to order. We will postpone the Pledge of Allegiance until we enter open session at 6:30. Same with open forum. With that,
Executive session. I move to go into executive session to discuss a King Caesar Fund case, which is of a confidential nature, as the fund's purpose is to provide medical relief for the financially needy residents of Duxbury, and if the chair so declares, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, and the Select Board will adjourn immediately after the completion of this executive session and reconvene in open session at or about 6:30 p.m.
As chair, I declare the necessity for executive session due to medical confidentiality regarding the King Caesar Fund case.
Second.
I need a roll call vote, please.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye?
Amy, aye. Cindy, aye.
All right. With that. To open session, we're reconvening here in open session, and the next item on the agenda that we had postponed from before is the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd ask you all to rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda is our open forum. If anyone would like to come to the podium and offer an agenda item for a future meeting, you may do so. I'd ask you to be brief because we cannot respond as that would violate open meeting law because it's not on the agenda. If any board members have anything for a future meeting or an announcement they'd like to make, you may do so now. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few things to share. One, the election that we had on Saturday. Just wanted to thank everyone for coming out. For those who were elected, thank you for your service to our community. Next, the MBTA Advisory Board. We met last week, the Passenger Rail Committee, and the reason I'm bringing this up to a community that doesn't have any rail is that many of our residents do take the train into Boston, and I wanted to share an update that I learned. Fare gates will be installed at South Station this summer. Fare gates.
Oh, Jesus, okay.
Yep, fare gates, turnstiles.
Styles.
It will require you to swipe your ticket when you get off at South Station in the morning and to swipe your ticket when you get in at South Station in the afternoon. So just be aware, it's something that's going to be new this summer. Next, employee health insurance program. I shared, Mike, you had a comment last week about insurance in town, and I raised that with the insurance committee the following day. And we will add this to a future agenda. I just wanted to point out that the details of the town's health insurance program were recently discussed during a joint select board FinCom meeting on February 6th. And the video, if you care to see it, is available at thelocalscene.media starting at timestamp 1 hour 28 through timestamp 1 hour 45 minutes and 14 seconds. Yes, I did check.
Thank you, Brian.
Finally, Massachusetts 250. Mass 250 is an initiative of the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, recognizing America's semi-quincentennial by helping communities highlight their historic significance, whether before, during, or after the American Revolution. And I bring this up because I've been helping organize an effort in Duxbury, and I'm excited to report that we're holding an organizational and planning meeting on Thursday, April 3rd at 10 a.m. at the Senior Center. And there's also a remote participation option for those who cannot attend in person. Just for your information, interested organizations so far include DBRS, Alden House, Duxbury Beach Reservation, the Art Complex, Historical Commission, the Historic District Commission, the School Department, and others. A big part of this initiative is to help boost local business, so we're still looking to have members of the local business community take part. And I'd like to share that a representative of Mass 250 will join us on April 3rd to help us get things moving. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Anybody from the community? Thank you very much. There being no further open forum, we'll move on to new business. We will be doing a swearing in of newly elected officials. And I know Sue's here, as well as Tara.
I think we only have two people here, actually. Amy has been sworn in already, Matt Ray and Steve Gant, because they had a meeting earlier. So I'll have you two step up front and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, please state your name, solemnly swear that I will faithfully and impartially perform all of the duties imposed upon me as a member of the Assessor School Committee for the town of Duxbury, according to the laws of the Commonwealth and the bylaws of the town. Thank you so much. Congratulations.
All right.
I'm gonna do the other one later. No speeches. I'd also like to take a moment, if I could, that because I was on the ballot, Assistant Town Clerk Tara Wakefield ran the election, and I would like to thank her for running a smooth election. with respect to the Housing Authority, as I said, she's been going through hundreds of ballots, teasing out the real candidates versus the Mickey Mouses or jokes, and she's been working on it all day, so we should have that information tomorrow.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
With that, the next item also on our agenda here is our annual Select Board reorganization. I did want to say that it has been truly an honor to be chair of this Select Board and a lot of fun, despite all of the obstacles we've had as a board and as a community this past year. What I had hoped to promote, and I think we all were successful at, was showing empathy to this community, allowing people to be a participant, to have a voice in our meetings, and to communicate their concerns. And I think we did a really excellent job of allowing people, whether it be, if you can think back to it, the predation meetings that we had, the discussions we had about our capital projects, the DPW and the seawall. All of these produced positive results for our community. I know that we also had numerous meetings about it at the MBTA, and obviously we had a significant number of meetings regarding the budget. With that, I think that we have had an important tradition here in the past few years of passing the baton from and allowing our members to all serve on the as chair and in other positions, and I think that's important, and I will miss it, but I would I know that Amy wanted to say a few words as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you. You've done a terrific job the past year. It's been a tough year, and I think there's probably rough roads ahead. So thank you. I think everyone knows, I always say, no matter what role you play up here, you only have one vote, and nobody's one vote is more important than anybody else's. So I feel like we all have an important role to play, and we all come at this from different angles and different strengths, and yet we all come at this with the best interests of the residents. So I think, that's really important. I have been a strong advocate for the rotation of leadership. I think it's important for everyone to get an opportunity to serve as chair. When Brian first came on the board, because he was new and because we were new at this 5-member board, he didn't get put into the clerk position, and as a result of that, it's just coming to light that he will not, his term is up this coming year, and he will not have had an opportunity to serve as chair. And again, I feel like that's really important, and it would be unfortunate if that were the case. So I am suggesting for the consideration of this board that we allow Brian to kind of leap over, like frog leap over, serve as chair. It won't affect any succession by doing that. Just me, and I'm fine. So with that being said, I would like to nominate Brian Glennon as chair.
Thank you.
Second. Sorry.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Amy. I
Now,
appreciate that.
I would like to nominate Amy McNabb as vice chair.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I would like to nominate Fernando as clerk.
Second.
That was a bit slow.
Sorry, I
did do the math.
was waiting for everybody.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Right.
it's unanimous. Congratulations,
All right.
All
everybody.
right, thank you.
Can I have the clerk stuff?
Here you go. shift everything to the plus there you are.
I'm going to go to the dugout.
No.
Oh, come
There you
on.
are.
You got the motions
I
there,
take
right?
Yep, get the motions right
Do
here.
I get out of this seat?
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda, it is past 6:35. We have a fee hearing, discussion regarding proposed water and sewer rates. Who is presenting?
I will make a motion to adjourn as a select board and convene as water sewer commissioners. I move that select board adjourn the meeting in order to meet as the water and sewer commissioners with the intent of reconvening as a select board afterwards. Roll call vote.
All those in favor? Oops, sorry. All those in favor?
Do we second?
I seconded it.
Oh, you second, yeah. Fernando, aye.
Brian, aye?
Michael, aye.
Amy, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Okay.
Great.
Do we need to open a public meeting?
Yeah.
Somebody has to read it
Yeah, we
out.
have another motion, yep.
All right.
I move that the water and sewer commissioners open the public hearing regarding proposed fee changes for water department dash proposed water and sewer rates.
Second.
All those in favor?
Fernando, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye.
Amy, aye.
Cindy, aye.
And today's fee hearing was advertised in Duxbury Clipper on March 12th, 2025, with a comment discussion regarding water and sewer rates. I move that the water and sewer commissioners approved. Oh, wait.
Not yet.
Next one, not yet.
Jumping the gun.
I'm jumping the gun.
God, that was an easy
It'll be a very quick
That was easy,
meeting.
wasn't it?
Time to go home.
That would be great.
We have a presentation?
Yep, Mary's here and Toby Federer and Mark is here.
Okay.
And Sheila is here.
So who is presenting? Is that Mary?
I'm going to start. Yep, I'm going to start.
Okay, great.
Okay, so there's Toby, and is Sheila in the room or is she online?
Virtual.
Okay, I just don't see her up here on the panel. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Oh, I lost everything.
All right, we see it.
Yeah, we got you.
You guys can see it, I can't.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right, let's try. Is that full screen now?
Yes.
All right, let me just, I
It's,
gotta figure out how.
Mary, it's full screen showing the next slide also.
Okay, hang on one second.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I'm just trying to get it on my
I read it.
screen over here. Okay, let's move this around.
Wait a minute, let's see. I got it up right
Fernando, is this your expertise?
Okay, can you see a
Yes.
single panel?
Perfect.
Yes.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, all right, fantastic. All right, I can't, it's captured my entire desktop, so I can't see any screens in the background, but, so I'm just talking to myself here.
Okay.
But before we get started, I would like to just quickly introduce, we have joining us this evening and available to answer questions, Corey Lyden, our treasurer, Mark Cloud, our water sewer superintendent, Sheila Scarzi, our DPW director, and Toby Federer, our consultant who assisted us with the water sewer rate study that is being presented this evening. So before we get into the meat and potatoes, by way of background, I just wanted to cover some information not only for this board, and some of it may be refresher, but also for folks who are following along for the very first time. By way of background, our water and sewer rates have not been adjusted since pre-2010. We haven't found any evidence that there have been any modifications or studies that have been conducted in the last 15 years that look specifically at adjusting our water and sewer rates. And during that 15-year time period, as you can imagine, our O&M, or operating and maintenance costs, have grown over the years, as one would expect with respect to labor, equipment, parts, supplies. We've implemented technology upgrades to achieve efficiencies, and there have also been an increased frequency of failures in parts of our system over those past 15 years. And with a consistent revenue structure or rate structure, it becomes increasingly difficult to keep up with these O&M costs over the last 15 years. During this time period, our capital investments have largely been reactive and limited due to funding. Our infrastructure is now 15 years older, And for an operation that is 24/7, 365 dependent operation with mechanical systems, we need to make sure that we have continued investment in our infrastructure to make sure that our systems are operational and meeting the needs of our residents in our community 24/7, 365. At the same time that we look at the things like O&M and our infrastructure, we also need to be cognizant and ensure the short-term and long-term fiscal health of both the water and sewer operations and their infrastructure. So as a result, we have undertaken a water sewer rate study. In order for us to do this, what we did is we issued an RFP, a request for proposal, back in the fall, and the dates are listed there for you. The responses came back in September. There were 5 responses received
Bless you.
from the RFP. We evaluated those 5 responses and we awarded the engagement to Ref Tellis Financial Consultants, who we have been working with since we have awarded the engagement. The cost was $58,000 for this water sewer rate study, and while that may seem expensive, it is a much needed investment in order for us to complete this study and be able to sustain these water and sewer operations to the level that they need to be. I will tell you that the study was funded with ARPA funding that was approved by the Select Board. The process for this water sewer rate study has included a large-scale data collection effort where every department, whether it was the finance department, the water sewer department, or even the treasury department, supplied a wide breadth of information to our consultant, who then performed extensive data analysis on our financial data, our debt models, our consumption history, as well as working with us to develop our desired goals and targets. We then worked with Toby on a number of occasions to review the rate model and do it through an iterative process, talk about the levers with which we needed to achieve our objectives, and we will talk about those shortly. There was a preliminary presentation presented to you, the Water Sewer Commissioners, on January 27th, where the bulk of the information that I'm talking about right now was also covered, and the data in the final report that you have in your possession was also discussed. That report was placed on file with the town clerk, as was just read as part of the public hearing process. And tonight we will be providing for you our recommendation on rates for both water and sewer operations. When Toby provided his preliminary discussion back in January, so 2 months ago, he covered steps 1, 2, and 3 of the rate study process, and tonight we are here to go through step number 4. So what are we going to do tonight? We're going to talk about 3 different rate proposals. 2 of them are for water. One rate proposal will consider setting rates or adjusting rates without consideration for PFAS investment, and the other option will consider PFAS investment, and we need to make a decision. We will provide you with our recommendation. Then we will take a look at our sewer rate proposal, and we are hoping through the context of tonight's conversation that we are able to answer all of your questions effectively, so that in an ideal world we would be able to adopt new rates that would become effective on April 1st of this year. We are recommending that this evening we adopt a 3-year rate model as opposed to a 5-year rate model. The examples that were included in the 5-year report and the model that we asked Toby to prepare for us was a 5-year model. However, we are only asking tonight to look at adopting 3 years worth of rate structure, because we want to leave open the opportunity to review this more frequently and make sure that the rates that we are adopting now, that we don't bind ourselves for too long a period, and that we have the capability and the impetus to go back and review the impacts of these rate adjustments on both our operations, our revenue, and our ratepayers. If we are able to adopt rates this evening and make those rates effective for April 1st of this year, then those rates would be applied to the August 2025 billing cycle. that would reflect the consumption period of April through June. So what happens is we have a consumption period. Once that consumption period is completed, then our staff goes out and spends a couple of weeks going through the entire community, doing our meter reads, bringing that data back in-house so that it can be loaded into our software systems, where a wide variety of analytics are performed against those meter reads before it's then transmitted to the treasurer's office for preparation of a billing file that then gets sent out to our billing printer. So that's the ideal situation or result from tonight's hearing. Regardless of whether we are able to come up with a final recommendation through the Water Sewer Commissioners this evening, or regardless of whether that April 1st target date is met, we are still transitioning to a quarterly billing cycle. Now, we've talked about this for the last several months. The town is currently semi-annual, and we intend to move forward with a quarterly billing cycle, regardless of whether we change rates of April 1st or not. The transition to a quarterly billing cycle accomplishes a number of goals and objectives for us as well as for our ratepayers. First and foremost, it smooths out the billing charges over 4 installments annually. It enables faster leak detection, not only for us, but also for our customers. And faster leak detection means faster remediation and fewer problems that we are able to address for the customer and for us quicker. It also enables us to identify meter problems much quicker by bringing that data in, and by using the new software that we have upgraded to. We have access to a whole host of new metrics and analytics that allow us to look at either misreads, bad reads, or missing reads, so that we can then engage our staff to go out and take a look at those meters and potentially replace those meters at a much faster rate than waiting for a semi-annual time period. And lastly, a quarterly billing cycle also allows us to gain access to consumption data and perform analysis over shorter and seasonal intervals in order to look at patterns of usage and control or drive consumption or conservation patterns. So again, regardless of what happens this evening, we will be moving forward with a quarterly billing transition. So by way of background, our water operation consists of approximately 5,600 connections, the bulk of which, just over 5,400, are residential connections, and slightly more than 200 are commercial connections. Our staff operate and maintain 130 miles of water main throughout the town. There are 12 well sites, and the town experiences relatively slow growth in new connections. In other words, there's very limited development on an annual basis. And the reason I bring that up is when you have had a rate structure in place for 15 years and you've had very limited growth, that means that your revenues have been, and the consumption patterns over the last 15 years have been relatively consistent, because there hasn't been a pricing impact to drive change in those behavioral patterns. So what that means is that your revenue has been relatively consistent and is not keeping pace with the investments that we need to make in our infrastructure. Our sewer operation, as we all know, most properties in town operate a private on-site septic system. However, we do have sewer operations. We operate a wastewater treatment facility where the town is the largest customer of that wastewater treatment plant. That wastewater treatment plant services our school buildings, the library, the pool, the Wright building, as well as a small number of non-town owned connections that are sending flow to the wastewater treatment plant. In addition, the town operates 3 geographically located sewer systems. First one is called Bay Road, where there's approximately 29 connections. The second one is Snug Harbor, Bluefish, and there's approximately 18 connections. And the third geographically located sewer system is over on Gurnett Road with approximately 195 connections. The uniqueness about the Gurnett Road sewer system is that the flow itself is actually sent over and processed by Marshfield, and then the town pays Marshfield twice a year via an intermunicipal agreement for the processing of that flow. Now, these geographically located sewer systems, when they were developed, they were initially funded via betterments, but those betterments have since matured, which means that the town now owns the existing systems. In order for us to successfully operate and maintain both the water and the sewer operations, on an annual basis, we develop a budget, just like we do for all town departments, and that budget needs to be supported by revenues. That budget includes not only staff as well as expenses, but it also incorporates a component of debt. With respect to the water operation is fully self-funded, and that operation is an enterprise fund. So the rates that we set for the water system are intended to cover all expenses of that water operation. That includes their existing operations and maintenance, their staff and their expenses, as well as their debt service. However, when it comes to sewer, the sewer is not self-sufficient, nor, given the current construct, would it ever be. So the town's sewer operation is part of the general fund. Now, we do charge customers who are connected to our sewer service, but those rates or those revenues that we derive from those users does not cover the entire cost of operating the entire sewer infrastructure. So that is not an enterprise fund, nor do I ever see it becoming one. A big part of this conversation tonight, and with respect to the setting of the rates, has to do with capital. And we know that, as I said before, a few moments ago, most of our capital investment has been reactive and has been limited due to funding. What the Water and Wastewater Superintendent, Mark Cloud, did is put together his capital program for both the water and sewer operation. And he did that using a couple of different sources. Number one, there is a water master plan that Mark went through and called out the capital items from the water master plan that he felt were items that needed to go into our capital program, and those are reflected here. In addition to that, there are capital items that are listed here that are the recommendations of both Mark and Sheila, working together with their extensive knowledge of water and sewer systems and the improvements that need to happen to both. So in the final report, you will see a much easier to read and complete version of the capital program for both water and sewer. This capital program that I'm looking at here does not include contemplation of PFAS investment. However, this capital program here does, and you can see in the lower portion of the capital program, it does contemplate some investment in PFAS. Tonight's conversation is not intended to be focused on which PFAS projects may or may not happen. Tonight's conversation should be focused on whether we are going to adopt rates that include PFAS investment or do not include PFAS investment. And this is the capital improvement program for sewer as compiled by Mark. So with that being said, taking a look at our O&M expenses as well as our debt expenses and putting together rate models, we need to derive what is the expected or necessary level of revenue to support that anticipated growth in our budget or growth in our expenses. So we start here by looking at our recommended revenue targets, and with respect to water, if we were not to move forward with PFAS investment, then what we would need to be targeting is an increase of 15% in our revenues for FY26, a 12% increase for FY27, and an 8% increase in FY28 in order to achieve the objectives that we just talked about. If we are going to move forward with PFAS investment, then those numbers look radically different. That would require that we set our rates so that we are generating revenue to support a 30% increase in FY26 of our revenues, a 30% increase of our revenues in FY27, and a 30% increase in our revenues of FY28. With respect to sewer, it's a much smaller target. The target, the necessary increases would be an 8% for 26, 27, and 28. So with those revenue targets in mind, I'm going to now flip it over to Toby to talk about the analysis with respect to consumption, as well as the actual recommended rate models.
Certainly. Thank you, Mary. Just to confirm, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so as Mary, thank you very much for that wonderful lead-in. I think you've described everything better than I would have for sure, so appreciated. As Mary was discussing, you know, part of the rate setting methodology, the first step is really determining how much revenue we need to raise in order to maintain the fiscal viability of the utilities. And she just went over those numbers. The second step really is understanding how we're going to generate that revenue, and that is where the consumption analysis comes in. Now, the chart you're looking at in front of you is really a statistical breakdown of how water gets billed by residential billings within the town of Duxbury. And in effect, what this shows you along the x-axis is basically the consumption that's put out on bills, and on the y-axis are the number of bills issued at that level in any given fiscal cycle. And then the two solid lines show what percentage, they both reference the right-hand vertical scale, and they show really the percentage of bills in red, or the percentage of the overall volume of water that is billed at or above each level of consumption shown on the x-axis. And really the two green dashed lines, the reason those are really highlighted is those are sort of the median customer in Duxbury. Both 50% of overall number of bills and 50% of the consumption of water within Duxbury is put out at approximately the 30 unit, that's 30,000 gallon per bill level. And basically the important takeaway from this is we did do a deep dive as part of the rate recommendations we're about to review in the way that water has been billed in Duxbury historically. And all of that analysis builds into the rate model and how we expect different rate considerations that we took into account in order to impact revenue generation beginning next year and in the out years. Because obviously the revenue picture is very important when you're talking about the potential amount of capital investment that Duxbury is contemplating at this time. So with that said, unless I've missed anything, Mary, by all means, I'm ready to move on. Okay, so as Mary had indicated, we would be looking for adjustments of around 15% in revenues for 26, 12% in 27, and another 8% in 28 on the water side, assuming no PFAS adjustment. Now, one thing that I can say is a big portion of those adjustments aren't really, you know, they're, in many ways, they're to make up for the fact that there hasn't been a rate increase in 15 plus or minus years, and the fact that over time, incrementally, the costs of operating the utility have gone up, in addition to the need to make investments. And so these rate recommendations for the next 3 years, they contemplate both of those. They're both going to get you caught up to where you need to be in order to be fully paying for water and sewer service, and they're going to begin to pay for the non-PFAS related infrastructure upgrades. And what you can see, one note about all of the charts we're going to look at is they all are accounted for as a 4-time-a-year bill. And the thing that you'll notice there is the fixed charges for the current column are half of what they are. And that's because your current charges of $40 fixed charge is a twice per year bill. And so we've adjusted everything in the current column to reflect what those would have been had you already been billing 4 times a year, just to make this an apples and apples comparison. And what you can see is the level that we would recommend you set your fixed charges for both standard customers as well as the senior discounted customers over the course of the next 3 years. And then in the lower portion of that table, our recommendation for what we believe your volumetric charges should be, keeping the exact same volumetric rate structure. And similar to the 4 times per year versus 2 times per year consideration that I mentioned at the top part of the table, on the bottom part of the table, you'll notice that the tier sizes are half of what the current biannual tier sizes are. And again, that's because the billing period is being divided in half. And so for equivalent consumption, the value of consumption at each tier level also must be adjusted by the fact that we'll be billing twice as frequently. So for example, a person who was going to stay in tier 1, let's say they were going to stay right at the top of tier 1 under the existing biannual billing, would pay a $40 annual fee or $40 fixed fee in the current schedule, and they would pay 20 units at the $455 rate for a fiscal 25 bill. Assuming this were next year, where we were using a 4 times per year billing policy, they would have over that time received 2 fixed charges each 3 months, each one for $20 rather than $40, and each time in each 3-month period, they would receive the full 10,000 gallons at the lowest rate. And so the only thing I want you to understand is, although we are showing volumetric tier sizes as different, from a functional standpoint, these will operate exactly the same as the tier sizes that have been in force in Duxbury for many years. And in closing, the rates that are shown in this table are intended to increase revenues at the rates that were discussed earlier by Mary. And just to hit the nail once more on the head, they're intended to catch you up from a small structural shortfall that you have in operations right now, where we would foresee that if the budget is fully expended in fiscal 25, indeed, you're not going to collect enough revenue to fully cover your costs. So we would be correcting for that situation, as well as making sure that the water department had the money they need to begin with the capital program that's envisioned. And with that, I can either take questions or I can jump right into with PFAS, because obviously this is a much different picture. And there's a couple of reasons for that. What you will probably or possibly might be thinking is that, well, you know, those costs don't immediately start happening. But there's a couple of reasons why we want to begin increasing rates pretty dramatically early in the process of such a large capital investment program. One of the first and most important strategic considerations is because rates have been static for so long, we have no idea what the price demand response is going to be to increases in the charges for water. And if there is a significant demand response with increasing price, the thing that will or may allow Duxbury to do is either delay or modify its capital improvement program. By definition, oftentimes the box that utilities can get themselves painted into is they defer needed rate increases long enough, because obviously no one really enjoys seeing large rate increases, but they defer them long enough that they're unable to avoid unnecessary upgrades. And so the classic case would be if the town of Duxbury can, with significant rate increases in the early years, reduce peak demands, there might be a portion of the PFAS upgrades that are not needed in the long run. And the painting into the corner piece would be by, if you were to defer needed rate increases, what you might end up doing is getting all the way through the construction process on multiple PFAS projects that might not be needed, and then receive the demand, the price response on the demand side. And then you have a smaller revenue generation capacity because you need much higher rates, and that further depresses demand, and it can be a little bit of a downward spiral. That's something we want to avoid. And so one of the ways of getting out ahead of that is in the early years of very large capital programs, you can design rate increases that will both help you build reserves to an appropriate level, considering the tens of millions of dollars that's being contemplated and being spent in the next 5 years here, if not more. So you would be building reserves to support that kind of capital program, but you would also at the same time be figuring out whether or not the changes in pricing are going to change demand patterns and consumption patterns in Duxbury. And so what we've laid out here is 3 years of increases at the level that would really be required to support the first PFAS project fully. And that's the rationale for the 3-year rate set, is because 3 years from now, it will be time to reassess whether or not your consumption patterns and the amount of water you're selling to all of your customers has been impacted dramatically by the increase in rates, because these are annual large rate increases, as is evident to anyone who looks at the table. And so that being said, each of these is intended to, from the preceding year, increase revenues all in by 30% per year. And we do that with a combination of changes to the fixed charges and the volumetric charges concurrently.
Okay.
Toby, do you have a number of slides to go? I'm just trying to decide whether to take questions now or continue to wait.
Yeah. Brian, if I may, there's just one more slide left to go over with the table for the sewer rate structure.
Okay.
And then I can stop sharing my screen so we can actually see you, and then we
Great.
can
All
start
right.
taking
Yep,
questions,
let's
if
do
that's
that.
okay.
Yep, keep going, thanks.
Okay. Wonderful. And then on the sewer assessment, obviously we did a very similar process. The addition or sort of the important distinction was the town of Duxbury asked us to analyze the relative degree of cost that each of the various subsystems adds into the overall sewer. It's not really a fund, but the sewer operations budget. And we went in and we did an allocation of expenses to each of the various subsystems based upon the town's operations, and we detail this in some degree to some detail in the report. But what we found, and this is really important to the overall recommendation, what we found is that the Gurnett Road service area and the rates that they charge therein are really the only ones that are fully supporting the provision of the sewer service they're receiving. And so under the idea of we would like all of the customers to be equitably treated, the idea was we know that in Gurnett Road, the charges that they're levied basically support the provision of services that are being, that we're attempting to pay for. We decided that we would apply those across all of the, or we decided to recommend to apply those against all of the customer base. And the simple rationale there is, as Mary alluded to, in some of the areas there are a relatively small number of customers, and with some of the town properties that don't have year-round equivalent usage, it's a little bit more difficult to get to true equity between the town customer use and the non-town customer use on those systems. But we knew that Gurnett Road was pretty much self-financing, and so we decided to recommend a model based on the Gurnett Road rates adjusted to reflect the expectations for capital investment and increasing costs. And you see that on this table with both the fixed charges and the volumetric charges based upon the Gurnett Road model right now. And that was the total of the recommendations coming from the study. So with that, I'm more than happy to talk as long as you would like.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen because I think for me, it takes up the whole screen.
Well, there's certainly a lot there, and thank you both. Why don't I start down on the left side of the table? Cindy, with your end, if you have questions, we'll go right down the line.
Just sort of a question I could probably answer myself. Having to do with the PFAS, is the expectation that all PFAS remediation work is going to be required to be paid for by the various municipalities without any state or federal aid?
Are you talking in general across the Commonwealth or specific to the town of Duxbury?
Well, certainly specifically to Duxbury, but I mean, in general as well. I mean, is that how this is, you know, most towns are going to be having this same issue. Is this how the remediation is going to be paid?
So I know Toby has worked with a number of other customers, but, and he can share his insight. There are communities across the Commonwealth who have already begun significant, large-scale investment in PFAS remediation, tens of millions of dollars, and that is because their levels of contamination have been far higher than what we're seeing here in Duxbury, and it was a more emergent need in a number of communities. I think we've talked about Easton as an example, that they had to do something a couple of years ago. They got to the point where their level of contamination was so great that they were actually supplying bottled water to their community and having water filling stations. They bore the cost of their PFAS remediation with very limited assistive funding. They did qualify for the SRF, the State Revolving Fund financing at a lower interest rate. And I think, as you are aware, our projects, the first PEF that we applied to for the State Revolving Fund consideration did not qualify. We do not reach a level of contamination that makes us competitive for those low interest loans. So at this time, Cindy, there are not large-scale grant programs or earmarks available for PFAS remediation, and given the uncertainty of what's happening at the federal level and being pushed down and affecting financing at our state level, it's unclear whether there is going to be any significant funding available. I do know that we have participated in a class action suit, and we are hoping that there may be at some point in the future some funding available through that mechanism, but that's, that may be years off, if at all.
All right, so what we need to do is to go forward planning, if we're going to include the PFAS, is to go forward planning that this is coming from our own coffers, okay?
Correct, given the time frame that I have heard from this board that they want to complete those projects, absolutely.
Okay.
Amy?
I have some questions about the sewer rates. I think it makes a lot of sense to have the one rate across the board. It just seems fair. And it sounds like the sewer rates haven't been covering the costs of the sewer for quite a while, except for the Gurnett residents. And I'm just wondering if that is, if we had this in a separate fund, which I know you said that you don't see that happening in the future, but had this been a separate fund, would we not have recognized that the monies we were charging weren't covering the costs sooner? And would it be a benefit to have a separate fund for the sewer rates?
So whether it's in a separate fund or not would not have any bearing on us, on this community taking a look at the level of spending being done on sewer versus the revenue that's coming in. It doesn't need to be in a separate fund to do that analysis at all. And the, in order to establish an enterprise fund, you need to have a self-supporting operation. So for us to propose to set up a sewer enterprise fund right now would not make any sense because it is not a self-supporting operation.
Okay. And just with the rates, if we were to go to the Gurnett rates across the board, that would cover costs such as maintenance, repairs. It would satisfy those needs moving forward.
Barring any major catastrophe, yes, that is the intent. And you know, as you highlighted and as Toby's mentioned, the rates that were set for the other two geographic systems, you know, they've essentially been getting a good deal for quite some time. But their rates were, you know, too low, quite frankly.
Yeah, and that was why I was asking about the separate fund. Would that have been recognized sooner so that we could have made corrections if it had been in a, that was my point
Yeah,
with
I mean,
the separate fund.
I think the recognition of sewer not being self-sustaining has been a known issue for a very, very long time.
Thank you.
Mike?
First, with the capital improvement projects, if somebody from DPW or Water could just explain some of these projected projects that are justifying the increase in our water rate.
Yep, Mark, are you there?
Mark Cloud, Water and Sewer Superintendent. Was there specific capital improvements that you?
There were some that were larger ticket. It's not on the screen anymore, but there were some that were larger, like in the over $1 million range.
So one of the big ones that I requested is $2 million a year for water main improvements. I've been able to identify a lot of old water mains that are critical in the system and need to be upgraded. One example is there's a early 1900s 12-inch cast iron water main running through Hall's Corner, and that supplies your Captain's Hill tank on Crescent Street. And it's a very critical intersection for all the force water mains. So that's just one water main, the main that goes up the hill to the Captain's Hill tank. It was the original water main. It wasn't upgraded in 1972 when they upgraded the tank itself. So that's another really weak point in the system, that if you lost that, it would be very difficult to supply water to the town without that tank in service. And then there's many other, where we've been looking at St. George Street, Depot Street. There's just a lot of old water mains that we should be addressing to make sure we have sufficient, reliable supply.
So for the most part, it's water mains that justify that.
Yeah, that was the big one.
And maybe this is for Toby. What's the percentage of that 15% increase that's coming from capital improvements? Or what piece of it, if you know?
So in the near term of the first couple of years, as I said, there's a significant component of that is actually catching up with, you know, basically overcoming the existing structural shortfall that we see. Now, on an average year, I would say probably, and when I say average year, I mean average water sales, because when you have a rate structure like your Water Enterprise Fund does that has both fixed and variable components, and specifically in Duxbury's case, where north of 90% of your revenues come from the variable component there, you have what is known in the industry as the potential for a dry year, wet year impact on overall revenues. When you have a dry year and there's a lot of irrigation demand, obviously those years financially perform quite a bit better than very wet years. And that's simply because, you know, when you look at the operational expenses of a utility, most of them are pretty much baked into the cake. Whether you have a wet year or a dry year, the incremental cost of producing extra water is not that large if you aren't taking treatment-based capital into effect. But it's about, I would say, in the first 2 years, it's probably in the 12 or so percent range of the 25 that you're looking at in the first 2 years.
Thank you. Existing debt service, in our rate study here, there's a discussion of how that's factored into it. That's correct, right? The existing?
Yes.
Why is the DPW facility factored into, I know it's for the years, and then the public can't see this, for it looks through 27 through 30 fiscal years. Why is that as part of the water rate?
So I'll take that one.
Yeah.
We've had this conversation before when we were going through all of the meetings regarding the DPW facility itself. Back in 2018, when you guys, I think it was 18, Rainey, correct me if I'm wrong on the years, when you guys, or 15, when you did the feasibility study for the DPW facility back during its initial planning, a decision was made by the town to split the cost of, or to share the cost, I should say, of the construction of the DPW facility, its related debt. And it's essentially an 80-20 split between the general fund and the water enterprise. So that is not something that we fabricated. That was a decision that was part of the planning process and was communicated and adopted by town meeting many, many years ago.
Because the building supports that aspect, right? And that was
That's correct.
the building supports the water and sewer activity set.
And I'm just on that last point, so when did town meeting approve that being an 80-20 split?
2015.
It was, yeah.
2015, you said?
Yeah. It was either 2015 or 2018.
It was either 2015 or 2018. I compiled all of this information and I've shared it with you guys back when we had Weston and Sampson going through and doing their presentations for the DPW facility. I'll dig that out and I'll send that back to you. But given that the entire DPW operation is going to be headquartered out of that facility, and that water enterprise fund is part of the operation that's going to be running out of that facility. Their equipment is coming out of there. Their cars are being serviced there.
Yep.
They are going to be utilizing that facility. And because it is a self-supporting business entity, all costs related to that business entity should be supported by the rates of that business entity. And therefore, the cost of that construction is part of the enterprise fund going forward.
Okay, that 20%.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I had.
Fernando.
Yeah, so a question and a comment. So I'm looking at table 4. Maybe Mark can help me here. I'm comparing the investment with PFAS and with no PFAS spending. And I'm just wondering why the sewer debt is different with no PFAS. The sewer debt is significantly higher than when you compare with the PFAS. Maybe just help me understand.
Fernando, which page are you on?
I'm looking at page 13, table number 4.
That doesn't make sense, does it?
This is water capital, and where are you?
Yeah, so if you look at the
Okay,
yeah.
with that, yep, down the bottom, and
Down-
what are you saying?
Yeah, so basically, if you look at the table that has with PFAS spending, the total sewer debt funded by utility is in 2026 is 275, 625, and then the next tranche is in fiscal year 28, 364, 652. However, with no PFAS spending, if you go down there to the same line item, there's spending every year from 26 to 30. So I'm just trying to understand why that is.
Funded utility, sewer debt funded utility. Debt financed. I'm just trying to follow it. Okay, so the upper row here where it says FY '26 says 275, 625, and FY '28 says 364, 652. That row?
Yeah, that row, but if you go down to the next, to that same table, then the sewer debt is significantly higher and is debt every year.
Sewer. I actually think that that's on the wrong row. I think that actually should be on the row above it. Which is water-funded debt or
Right.
SRF.
It's on the wrong row.
That's what it looks like to me.
Okay. That would, but when you, yeah, because the other one's got P. But it doesn't work out because there's, let me see, with PFAS, there's no spent in 27, and there's, yeah, the top row works, right? The top row is 1736, right? It's just the
Yep.
next two rows don't kind of make sense.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and look at that.
Yeah, is that going to affect the rates?
No,
Do we?
no, I
Do we
just
have
think
the
that that's a typo in that table.
So you're asking if PFAS is going to affect the sewer rates?
Well, it would seem to.
It says
actually,
it would, but I don't know
No,
how.
it's the other way around, actually. Without PFAS, the sewer rates are far, the debt for sewer is far higher. So I'm just trying to understand, one, is this table correct? And if this, or not, and then was this table used to calculate the rates, right? That's what I'm trying to understand.
So I wanna just correct something I think I just heard you guys say.
Yep.
Which is the debt for sewer is much higher with PFAS.
With
And
no
that's not the case at all. So the PFAS debt would be related to water and not sewer.
No, well, let me be clear. In this table number 4, right? Is there any way you can bring that up on the screen or something, Mary? We can take a look at it?
Yep. Let me share my screen again. Hang on a second. Where'd my share button go? Here it is.
Trouble is you won't be able to see it, but
Whoop, hang on. Can you see my screen?
yeah, there we go.
All right, let me get to the right page.
Yeah, there we are.
Can you increase it a little bit
Yeah.
for the screen?
You can see the issue, right?
I can. You're
Yeah, you
talking
can.
about, whoop, hang on.
Yeah, so
This row
here.
right here.
Yeah.
Whoop. Can you see that sort of pseudo highlighted?
Exactly.
And this row right here.
They don't compare, and this is without PFAS, right? So the sewer, yeah.
So
Just a
that's why I
question.
say it's not, it appears to be on the wrong row because PFAS, so debt related to PFAS is not related to sewer.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's correct. I'm just,
And so by the mere fact that it's here, indicates to me that there's a typo.
there's a typo in that table.
It should be the
Correct, really, yeah.
next
Yeah,
line
okay.
higher.
So everybody, tonight, we're going to vote on water and sewer rates, and I just want to make sure, Mary and Toby, that we're going to vote on the right numbers, right? That's my point.
Yes. I believe, to Mary's point, I'm sorry to just interject here.
Yep.
I believe it's just a tabular misreference, and I can certainly correct this.
And to answer your question, this table is for presentation purposes.
That's right.
There's a model behind all of this, a very detailed model that pulls together raw data from different variables. And that raw data we have gone through consistently, Mark,
Okay.
Sheila, Toby, and myself. And it does not affect the rates that we're talking about here. This was a table that was compiled for presentation purposes, and it looks like we have a typo on that row.
Okay.
So
that
we will correct that and reissue that table for you.
All right, I appreciate that. The other, it's just a comment, right? And I think that, thanks for bringing it up, Toby. My concern was, I think we talked about before, is building PFAS facilities that we don't need. And obviously with the water rates increasing significantly, the concern would be that we would build these facilities and the rate would come off. So what you're saying is you basically force the understanding of the impact of the rates by not increasing the rates gradually, but you load it up front. So you kind of drive people's behaviors, so you'll have a better understanding, and you may be able to back off on PFAS construction, i.e. taking on debt, because you're folks are already cutting back their consumption.
That's exactly right. And, I probably didn't convey it very artfully, but really sort of the worst, in a case like this, the worst case scenario from the standpoint of water rates long-term is to do nothing that might change the behavior that would improve the overall capital investments early on. And so, that would be characterized by saying maintenance of your existing water rates would allow for no change in, or would provide no incentive for a change in demand patterns, which would lead you to build all of the CIP that's currently thought possibly necessary for PFAS.
Yeah.
And then after all of that had been done and water rates had to go up because the enterprise fund is a self-funding mechanism, then the amount of water that people used went down dramatically in response to much higher rates. And then you have a much smaller number of gallons that you're selling, but your revenue requirement remains the same.
Yep.
And it can lead to an upward spiral in volumetric rates.
Right.
And that's what by adopting more aggressive rate increases up front strategically is smarter, because it is likely to optimize the amount of dollars you have to spend long-term. And by definition, spending is future rates.
Yep. Yep.
And one thing I would like to point out about the rates is, there, as you can see, there's two parts to a rate. There's the fixed charge and the volumetric charge. It would be much easier and on my anxiety if we leaned more heavily on the fixed rate as opposed to the volumetric rate for revenue stability and revenue sustainability, not necessarily sustainability, but revenue stability in our operation. However, by not relying more heavily on the fixed charges and relying on the volumetric, what that does is it also gives the consumer the ability to control how much they use and therefore how much they pay with respect to water. So I know that this board, as well as other boards, are concerned and interested in seeing conservation, and by doing so, folks have a very direct impact on the cost of their water. Now, we're going to have to be sensitive to that price, that elasticity, but out of the gate, these rate adjustments favor folks being able to change their consumption patterns and demonstrating to us the level of consumption that they're comfortable using and paying for.
Right. The final comment is there a slide or something that, for the override, we used the average single-family home value, and people can see the impact on their tax bill. It's very difficult for me to see what is the average single-family impact on this water rate. I think it would be helpful. Do you have that available so that we can take a look as we, yeah?
Yep, let me, hang on one second. Let me share my screen again. All right, can everybody see that?
All right.
Yes.
Yep, figures 17 and 18. Toby, do you want to sort of give them a walkthrough on, I don't know if I can get both of them on the screen at the same time.
Yes, we
Can
can see
Can
it.
you guys still see that?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty visible. So what this is just the projected annual water cost for a family using the current median bill. So right now you have a median bill in Duxbury of 30 units, which is 30,000 gallons, billed twice a year, so 60,000 gallon per year.
Yep.
And what we did is we built out under the two rate recommendation scenarios, one which is recommended if Duxbury intends to proceed with PFAS projects. I want to be absolutely clear on what the recommendation is, and one that is really our recommended minimum and then that would only be in consideration if Duxbury did not want to proceed with PFAS projects, but you have them one above the other. I intentionally set both of these at the same vertical scale because it is a real difference, but in stack bar format, the green shows the fixed charges on an annual basis, and the cyan shows the volumetric charges associated with that 60,000 gallons in annual usage. that we see as the current average demand within Duxbury. To Mary's point, of course, you can see that the majority of the revenue and cost to your average customer goes out as part of the overall variable volumetric charge, and that is the piece that customers will have direct control over by their water usage patterns.
Right, so basically, let's look at fiscal year '28. The average water bill will go from just over $500 a year to just over $800 a year. Am I reading this correctly?
Those are stack bar formats, so they're additive, the two numbers in each bar channel. So in fiscal '25, on the top chart.
No, I understand that. I'm just looking at fiscal year '28. I'm adding them all up, right? If you look at the with no PFAS, the total is just over $500, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Now I understand. I thought you were referring to two on the same chart. My apology.
And then basically with PFAS, it will be just over $800. So basically, it's $300 more a year with PFAS in fiscal year '28.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Yep.
Thanks. You touched upon where I was going. So keeping on this slide for a second, can you help us understand what the current payment, what the current ratepayers pay versus what we're going to pay? So I understand we're comparing here on these tables with and without PFAS what we will potentially pay, but how much more is this than what we currently pay, if that makes sense?
That would be shown in the left-hand most stack bars, and they're identical because, of course, neither of these policies have been adopted yet. So you would be looking at somewhere around $350 annually in fiscal year '25 under either of these rate increase scenarios. And then they change from the current bill, which is at the current rates, commensurate to the decisions of the board.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything further from Mary or Toby? Because then I'd like to open it up. Sheila, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, not at this time.
Okay. And
Could you also ask about the conservation plan? I know when we talked
Right.
about this before, they had talked about also initiating I'm asking, I think Sheila, you had mentioned the last time we spoke of this, a conservation plan, a plan really helping the consumer to understand and conservation. I know Mark had also talked about some possible restrictions similar to what other towns are doing. Watering only allowed 1 day per week, I think, in Situate we talked about. Can you touch on some of those issues?
Well, yeah, it's actually a timely question. With the help of Apex, we had submitted a grant application to develop a water conservation plan. We were just notified that we did receive the grant for $27,800.
Good.
So we're going to be getting started on that. I think that grant needs to be expended by June 30th. So you'll hear a lot more about that soon. Mark, I don't know if you want to touch upon the water restrictions that you plan to enact.
We just have the typical annual water restrictions at this point.
Okay. And then
Thank
we'll
you.
have the water conservation plan before June 30th, by the sounds of it. Good. So
And
we
we have
build on that.
the new irrigation policy, which will help also.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent.
I see we have a couple of members of Water and Sewer Advisory Board here, Paul and Bo. Is there anything you guys would like to add?
Sure. Bo Boynton, 48 Russell Road, Water and Sewer Advisory Board. The first thing I wanted to do is offer some compliments to the leaders in our department. I think Mark and Sheila have just unanimously exceeded every expectation of my expectations of our new DPW director and water and superintendent. I'm seeing so many more new efficiencies in the departments. So many of these things that were unseen before are being brought to the forefront and taken so seriously, and I just wanted to applaud them. To comment on these water rates, I feel so strongly about like what Fernando and others have spoken about, where water conservation is so important. And I hope that these water rates do whatever they can to support water conservation. I think for so many reasons, it's going to better the lives of the people in this town. I think that we have a portion of our water supply that is clean and a portion of our water supply that has some more PFAS in it. And the more we can conserve that water, the better. For me, the elephant in the room is the use of our water for irrigation. I think that right now there's still existing irrigation infrastructure that is allowed to be used to irrigate lawns and gardens, etc. And if these water rates encourage or make people think twice about using our resource for that purpose, I think that's a really good thing. I think the cost of a resident taking a shower is going to go up very, very little, but the cost of a resident watering an acre of grass is going to go up very much. And I just think that this is all really good conversations, and I think that Duxbury's doing a good job. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Paul?
Hi, Paul Cohen, Water and Sewer Advisory Board. In the interest of educating the public a little bit more, regardless of the way you guys vote, I'd suggest that we put up some of these graphic materials that's been provided already in this onto the website so that people can understand where we're going with this and see that they might have a little bit more control in the future.
Okay.
That's my only comment.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good comment.
The intent would be to publish the final report and the slide deck on the website. We can hopefully get that done tomorrow.
All right.
Any other questions from the board before I open it to the public?
No.
All right, anybody from the public? I'll entertain folks in the room before online. Alicia?
Alicia Babcock, Ocean Road South. I was just curious to know if maybe Mary or Sheila, you could answer. Is the Gurnett Road area, was any consideration taken to the rate increase since we get our water and sewer resources from Marshfield regarding the PFAS scenario? Because we wouldn't be drawing down on any new filter or any water from Duxbury itself, and I just would be concerned that we potentially would be subject to PFAS remediation from Marshfield as well, and then we would get hit twice. So I'm just wondering if you've kind of looked at that in a separate box.
Are you talking about, when you say hit from Marshfield as well, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's hard for me to see. I'm sorry if you showed the numbers and the graphs. If you broke it out in that area too, I couldn't see what the rate increase was, if any, in the Gurnett area. But if Marshfield is treating the water supply that we're getting our water from, if they're adding PFAS from there as well, how would that work? I know we're paying rates to Duxbury, but we're drawing from a Marshfield resource.
For your water or for your sewer? So there's no separate water rate for Gurnett area. The water rates are for the entire town of Duxbury, all Duxbury customers. The geographic specific rates that we were talking about are sewer only.
Okay.
And PFAS does not apply to sewer rates.
Okay.
Okay,
so
maybe
Did that answer your question? I just want to make sure.
Sort of.
maybe ask it a different way. Is the Gurnett Road, where do you get your water from? You get it from Marshfield or you get it from Duxbury?
We get it from Marshfield,
Okay.
But you pay Duxbury.
but we pay Duxbury.
You pay
Right.
Duxbury, but you're
Right.
Oh, I see what you, I
No,
get it.
so we're not, no, we don't treat any water customers across the town of Duxbury differently, because not only are you getting water into your own home,
Right.
but all of the water that is also supplied to all of our town-owned facilities, all of the restaurants that you visit, all of the businesses that you patronize, all of that water is part of our overall water infrastructure. So there's one set of rates for
Yeah.
all water customers for the town of Duxbury.
Yeah, no, and that's fine, I understand that. I guess theoretically, what I'm asking is there a scenario where Marshfield increases the rates to Duxbury, and then you charge us because they're upgrading their system, and now we're indirectly paying for 2 PFAS remediations? Is that likely, or, I don't know?
Mark's going to answer that question.
No, we wouldn't have two separate water rates. There's always going to be one water rate for the town, all residents in Duxbury.
Okay, but Marshfield wouldn't pass off onto Duxbury another...
It would increase what we paid to Marshfield, but
Yes.
we wouldn't increase the water bills to Duxbury residents anymore.
That's line item in our budget, that's part of the O&M.
Okay.
And so, by us reviewing the rates on a more frequent go-forward basis, any significant impacts that Marshfield's invoices may have on our budget would need to be evaluated. At this time, we have not seen that happen, and we have no indication that that is forthcoming. So I would say right now we are moving forward with one rate and don't anticipate that we would have significant changes to these rates that were being presented tonight.
Thanks, Mary. Nancy, do we have anybody online with their hands up?
No, sir.
Okay, great. Any other question? I have one question. With respect to the proposed rates we're being asked to vote on tonight, I know we talked about, I guess, Mary, it's a question to you. We talked about a 3-year period. If we're considering a potential increase with PFAS, which is a significant increase, 30%, what ability do we have to revisit that prior to the expiration of 3 years? So let's say it works, market forces work wonders, and all of a sudden consumption is way down. Can we come back and level it off a little bit, or are we stuck with the 30, 30, 30?
Now, nothing precludes you from revisiting it sooner rather than later. We would go through the same process of advertising the public hearing so that folks knew that evaluation was going to happen. It's not going to preclude us. I just think it makes sense for us to set rates for a shorter time period right now because this is so new and it includes so many new things that it doesn't make sense for us to project a longer window.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
But we can come back. Yeah.
Randy, I forgot to ask you if you had anything to add.
Nope, thank you.
Okay, great. Discussion.
Want to go left or right?
Well, this can be a popcorn round. So anybody can just raise their hand.
Popcorn around. I'm
Yeah.
ready
I
for a
like
vote.
that. I think we have to do it. We don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Well, we have the choice, right, between with or without.
I think for me, it has to be with PFAS.
I fall into the no PFAS. I think the water rate too is responsible, and this is something we can revisit in a few years.
Well, I think if you go with the no PFAS route, then you are setting us up for needing to do some type of a debt exclusion, some type of an article at town meeting to treat the PFAS. Am I correct there, Mary? There wouldn't be, if we don't go the PFAS route, there won't be money in the kitty in order to fund the upcoming PFAS. So we'd have to do some type of an article.
I would encourage the board, the short answer is yes, Amy, but I still would never encourage a debt exclusion for this. It is an investment, PFAS is an investment in your water distribution system, or your water treatment and distribution system. And those costs need to be borne by the enterprise. So if this board chooses tonight to set rates with no PFAS investment, then we are not going to have sufficient funding to react and respond should the board then change their mind and want to do something with respect to PFAS. If there is any remote indication that we are going to do any remediation, we are recommending that the board adopt the rates with PFAS this evening.
So,
That being said, I also want to just sort of highlight, because we're hyper-focused on PFAS, which we know is a very expensive problem. But I also don't want to minimize the fact that we have an iron and manganese issue
Yeah.
at the Tremont Depot Street wells, that we have heard from the Water Sewer Advisory Board, loud and clear, as well as this board, that there is a priority or a goal and objective to address that. So the level of funding needed to address the iron and manganese, separate or combined with PFAS remediation, is important. And that we're calling it a rate with PFAS, but we should also call it a rate with PFAS, iron, manganese, and other treatment investments necessary.
So I can explain my position here a little bit, and it kind of dovetails off of what Amy's saying, is that to adopt the PFAS is to also almost dictate that would be doing $40, $80 million projects without the will of town meeting. I feel incredibly uncomfortable doing that as a 5-member water sewer commissioners, rather than hearing the input of the community about whether those are investments they want to make. We've even heard from our water advisory board dissension about which projects should take priority. We have also heard about the idea that our consumption could change the need to do anything. And we haven't seen these water rates go up, and what that would, and any of these conservation and water restrictions that might impact our consumption of water and allow us to avoid these massive capital projects. So where I am on March of 2025 is a responsible capital improvement plan based upon the recommendations from our water department and DPW that increases the rates, gets us back on track. And if in 3 years or sooner we are hit with some kind of regulatory or issue, I would be willing to react. I would allow town meeting to react to that, just as they would with any other quote scenario or difficult scenario. So that's my position on it. Yeah.
Brian, do you mind if I just jump in real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
Mike, I hear you, and I understand that perspective, and I think there's a great deal of rationality to that. I would simply argue that I believe we've already heard from town meeting last year with the overwhelming passage of Articles 14 and 15. The town has supported generously $1.7 million in moving forward with some sort of PFAS prioritization plan, investigation, with the expectation, and you guys have made it very clear, with the expectation that it may result in some large-scale projects. Now, so that being said, I think that is support enough for us to move forward with a rate that includes PFAS. Whether town meeting chooses to support a $40 million investment, those articles will absolutely go before town meeting. We know that the PFAS working group is moving forward. They intend to have some results in a prioritization plan in the not so distant future. And so I think if we move forward by setting the rates with PFAS included, even for year one, I think that will help to at least start to generate some reserves for us to continue the investigation process before we even bring to town meeting a large-scale project.
And I just would only suggest that, number one, we didn't spend all that money, and number two, I think town meeting would have felt a lot differently if that $1.7 million was outside a balanced budget. And if this was a debt exclusion, they would be asking far more difficult questions. And I don't think that vote for the 1.7 was to support a $40 million project down the road. It was an investigatory commitment. And I think that's appropriate. We have invested. We've approved investigation here. But there's been dissension, and there's been ideas about how to avoid this. So I just, this is not, and it's something that impacts the whole town. I know that you brought this point up about how it should it should be applied to the water rates, but I do think it should, and I'm glad to hear that it would go before the town, because it does impact, if we do have to do something in the future, it would impact the schools, it would impact the public buildings and everything else. So it's not just something that would be, you know, I think it's a town-wide issue. It's but I think it's for another day. And I really do think a conservative capital improvement plan is the appropriate way to go forward. And I'll leave it at that. I know I have other board members here.
Fernando?
We've discussed this a bunch. At the end of the day, right, as it stands right now, there is still in place a requirement, a compliance requirement for us to be able to deliver PFAS to the or water with PFAS levels lower than 4 parts per trillion, PFOA and PFAS. There is a regulatory compliance in place. We must achieve this by 2029. All right? That hasn't changed. Okay? So if we, and point number 2 is what Toby mentioned, right? Is that I initially, because all the discussions of how many plants to build, and the last thing I want to do is build a plant, spend all that money, and we don't need it because people's consumption has changed, all right? So I'm hearing tonight, which I thought was a nice point, right, is basically by putting in the rates for full PFAS remediation, all right, up front, all right, we basically have the opportunity to kind of better understand what consumption is. Just like Bo mentioned, consumption is people irrigating lawns. It's not for drinking water. The main consumption which drives us, and it's summer consumption for irrigation. If this rate increases, adjusts people's behaviors, right, we may not need to build any PFAS because we do have wells that are below the 4 parts per trillion, right? They're in compliance that we can supply the right amount of water, right? So if it turns out that people's behaviors change and it drops, then we can lower the rates. But we can't run the risk of basically not being in compliance and not having the funding. This requirement for PFAS treatment and the volumes we need is because people want to irrigate their lawns, right? Why should we ask the rest of the town that don't want to irrigate their lawns to carry the cost at an annual town meeting? I think it needs to stay within the water, the water rates, so the right people pay for they make the choice whether they want to use that water or not, right? So anyway, long-winded, basically I support the water rates with PFAS.
Amy?
I think that there is a desire in town for people to provide their families with safe drinking water. I don't question that for a moment. So I think we need to plan for this. I think that we should go with the plan and go with what has been recommended. Yep. and you know, move. I know it's tough. We have a town that has obviously made it clear that, you know, the big hits to their pocketbooks is tough, and we hear that. But for this, I think, and what might make you feel better is that if we, I have no illusion that we aren't going to have to at least treat one plant. I think that's been talked about. I think we're at least facing that. But the worst case scenario is treating multiple plants for almost $100 million, which I think we have a chance of avoiding. And if we implement this and we build up money in our coffers, and then we find that DEP or the feds or the tooth fairy is going to endow some money upon us to help with this, then we can lower the rates, and we can, you know, we have some money in there. We can reward the public. But I think we have to plan for this worst case scenario. And I think a part of why we're in this predicament, obviously PFAS, PFOA, who saw this coming 10 years ago, not me, but we haven't been, visiting these rates like we should periodically. So it's going to seem like a big hit. I'm sorry about that. It'll be a big hit for all of us too, but I think we have to do it.
I have absolutely nothing more to add to what Fernando and Amy have already said, and Mary, I would definitely vote to go with the rates with the PFAS.
Okay, Rainey?
One other thing to consider is that once the plants are built to treat PFAS, that you have to replace the media. So there'll be an ongoing expense, and it's not cheap. So just consider that as well.
And the issue about manganese and,
And where they actually, were they going to build a Yucca Mountain for the cartridges to PFAS?
Mark, did you have something else?
Yeah, I have one more thing.
Go right ahead.
So recently, I've had a lot of, or a couple synthetic organic chemical hits at the Lakeshore well, and I've also seen an increase.
A what?
Synthetic organic chemicals. They're called SOCs. And we've
One or the
Oh,
other?
good Lord, I don't know what
we
that is.
received
Sounds
hits at that
bad.
well, and I've seen increased nitrate levels. So I'm starting to become concerned that we might lose that well,
I'm sorry, which well is that?
Lakeshore.
Lakeshore well.
Has
I
there
just-
been any thought to, we've purchased all this open space of digging another well? I mean, we keep talking about all these wells that are contaminated around our.
Yep.
I mean, we invested in all this land. Why aren't we digging more wells?
So we did. We had Apex run water quality results
Yeah.
at Tea Kettle, and the water quality wasn't any better than
Yeah,
is it.
well, that's got dug to the core. I mean,
It's got the same PFAS
we all know
levels.
about that.
Blame us.
So-
for that.
I'm talking about other places. We've all across the town, we've got land.
Yeah, the only place that we've identified as a new well site is Tea Kettle.
It's all coming from the same source.
Well, we can pick this up.
Yeah, I
later.
disagree. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
at
it's.
some point, I would love to talk about future, because
Yeah.
we should be planning for, we should have a plan. If we only really have Tea Kettle as a potential future well, and now that's been deemed inappropriate. We probably should talk about having some additional well sites. I have brought up 100 times since I've been on this board the potential for the Webster Point, that 40B that was under litigation for a long time. There was, at one point, we received a report that was had been identified as a very good place for a future well site. It also satisfied, Marshfield doesn't have water in that area. We provide water to Marshfield. So it had been identified as a potential joint project. I don't know where that is. That land still hasn't been developed. I think it might be under agreement. But again, we should be thinking about this because we should plan for water, future water.
Yeah, great point. And I have great comments all around, and Mike, I think we're all on the same page in terms of we don't want to invest and have to make significant capital improvements if we can avoid it in other ways. So I hear you.
Yeah, we're going to be surprising a lot of people with a large increase in their water bills, and not just irrigation.
May I have a motion?
Yes, I move that the Water and Sewer Commissioners approve the proposed water and sewer rates, option 1, PFAS in capital improvement, as presented.
Which one?
Water rate option 1, PFAS in capital
That's the
improvement plan.
higher one. That's 30, right?
Yeah, PFAS in the rate number 1, right? In 4.2.2, water rate number, option number 1, rates with PFAS in CIP.
I'm looking at Rainey to make sure that's the correct number.
Can I share my screen for a motion?
Okay.
If I can do it this way, that way we all have it. Let's try it. Can you see my, whoop.
Yes.
All right. So right here,
That's what you want to say.
if we
Yeah,
we could
okay.
use, I don't know that you guys that you need to make a motion to accept quarterly billing, but while we have you, we might as well just get it on the record.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. It was in there. So let me go ahead. I move
To accept
that the
it.
Water and Sewer Commissioners approve, number 1, transition to quarterly billing, and 2, water rates as shown in Table 11 on page 33 of the final report, and sewer rates as shown in Table 15 on page 38 of the final report.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We need a,
Roll call vote? Yes, roll call vote. Fernando, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, nay.
Amy, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Okay, what's next?
Motion to adjourn as Water and Sewer Commissioners. I move that the board adjourn their meeting as Water and Sewer Commissioners and reconvene as the Select Board.
Second.
Fernando, aye.
Brian, aye.
Mike,
What's that? Huh? Okay.
Wait. I hate to say it, but it's not in here.
Yes, it is.
Where is it?
Yeah.
Oh, here.
Oh, because we went to semi-already correlated. Okay, all right. It's okay.
Do I have a procedural question?
yeah.
Sure.
So typically with a fee hearing, the department presents their fees to the fiscal advisory board, and then it goes to the select board. You guys are the department as the water sewer commissioners, and you've just adopted your rates. So procedurally, do we need to go back to fiscal advisory before you accept them as the select board?
No.
No.
What are they going to tell us that we,
No.
all right.
Okay.
I wouldn't wanna waste their time.
Can we and should we have the select board vote on these rates as part of our traditional fee hearing process?
No, they're acting as the water and sewer commissioners. I think we're fine right where we are.
Okay.
We
All
can
right,
check, we
so then
can
we're
check
good.
with council if we need to.
Effective. Okay, and so these were, because we were able to adopt rates this evening, they will be effective April 1st.
Let's verify
correct?
that. We'll verify that with Jeff tomorrow, Mary.
Okay, so we will be preparing an insert, a stuffer, that is going to go into the water bills that are going to be issued in April, so that notification will go out to the entire community in advance of this being applied to their August bill.
Okay, thank you.
So these rates will start April 1st?
Yes.
Wow, I'm gonna go home and take a really long shower. Might be the last one I
You have
do.
that motion to
Yes.
close?
Yes. I move that the Water Sewer Commissioners close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in
Fernando,
favor?
aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye.
Amy, aye.
Cindy, aye.
All right. And we have to,
Can I go ahead and close it?
Yeah.
we have to reconvene, right? As,
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and do that? I move that the board adjourn their meeting as Water Sewer Commissioners and reconvene as a Select Board.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Was that,
Roll call.
roll call?
Yeah, roll call.
Oh, there it is, so.
Yeah, yeah. We did, I thought did Fernando, aye.
Let's do, okay, Brian, aye.
Michael, aye.
Amy, aye.
Cindy, aye.
Great.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Mary, thank you,
Thank
Toby,
you,
thanks, everybody.
Mary.
Thank you, everyone.
So now we move
Hello,
on
Mark.
to, we have a
Feel
discussion
better,
with the.
Mary, you sound,
Awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we
We
feel
have a
bad.
discussion with the MBTA Communities Working Group and the Planning Board, both of whom have been waiting patiently. Thank you for that. We're going to talk about the, our compliance framework, and I will recognize Chairman Steve Gant.
We need to call the planning board to order.
All right, go right ahead.
Hello?
Hi,
Hello?
Kristen. Go
Can you see
ahead.
me?
Call yourself to
Gotcha.
order. Yep.
Hear me, okay. Hi, I'm Kristen Rapp, I'm the chair of the planning board, 20 Ryan's Lane. We'd like to resume the planning board meeting from earlier. Do we need to vote on that?
No.
Chair's
Yep,
discretion.
we're good to go, okay, all right, great, thank you. So right after us, I see select board members that you're going to be talking about your priorities, your goals for the year. Well, the planning board did something similar. We had a discussion about some short-term, long-term goals, which we'd like to talk to you about at a later session. But today, we'd like to talk about the very top goal for us right now, and that is compliance with MBTA's Communities Act. So I believe that in your packets there is a memo from our interim planning director, Rebecca Ruffley, outlining, memorializing a conversation that we had back in our February 10th meeting, and I'd like to talk with you about that, just to kind of hit on some highlights.
Go right
Is that
ahead.
okay with you?
Yes.
Okay? Okay, great, thank you. So, number one, we're here to talk with you, we'd like to get your support on our approach, and we'd like to talk with you a little bit about that. And then what I'd like to do is turn it over to Steve Gant, who's chair of the MBTA working group, and he'll go into greater detail with you. But basically, back in our February 10th meeting, we discussed the town's legal obligation to have multifamily housing in place by July 14th, pursuant to the multifamily zoning requirements of the MBTA communities. And since the community of Duxbury voted against zoning changes on 2 specific parcels back at the November 18th special town meeting, the planning board would like to recommend a different approach to meeting the town's obligation and seeks your support tonight. So first, we discussed our next steps forward, and we came to a consensus on a 2-pronged approach. The first is that we would like to work toward a minimal impact compliance to meet the letter of the law by overlaying existing development. And the second is that we would like to address the issue of multifamily zoning at a later date, but on Duxbury's terms and Duxbury's timeline. So in order to comply with this MBTA zoning obligation, we propose a 4-legged table approach to engage our 4 major constituencies in the process. Number 1 is the planning board. Number 2 is the select board, that's you. Number 3 is MBTA Communities Working Group, some of whom are in the audience there. And the 4th is our community. And the overall goal is to place the new zoning district in places that are already developed to lessen the immediate impact of the zoning. We'd like to do this by identifying existing multifamily and already developed areas and look at increasing the density. And then the next thing we'd also like to do in order to meet that is to work with consultants to help us on an outreach program. And there are a couple things along with that. The first is that we'd like to reassure the town that this doesn't mean that anything will actually be built, because that became very clear that people were concerned about that. Our focus is only to bring us into compliance. The second thing is we would like to talk about the grant money that we would potentially lose and also the fines that we could receive from the state to make sure that everybody understands that. And the third thing, and I kind of buried the lead on this, and Steve can go into this in greater detail, is that we learned some lessons the first go around, one of which is that we need to ask our community what they want to do with the town, what's important to them. And so we are looking at options, at asking the community for options. And in fact, the MBTA Communities Group had a session today. They're planning one tomorrow, and that's an opportunity for the public to come out and engage with us. So first of all, I would like to ask for on behalf of the planning board, we would like to ask for your support on this approach. And I wanted to, before I turn it over to Steve, I'd like to get feedback from the board on that.
Well, Kristen, I think we need the presentation from Steve before we can provide feedback. I've provided, in my capacity as the Select Board's member of the MBTA Communities Working Group, this has not been an agenda item, so I've just provided updates during open forum. But we're looking to tonight to be the presentation that will educate the Select Board as to the details, and I think then we'll have questions.
Excellent. Well, I'll just turn it over to Steve. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve Gant, 265 West Street. I'm the chairman of the MBTA Communities Working Group and a newly elected member of the Planning Board.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. So I'll be talking about I'll be presenting to you tonight an update on the status of the working group's progress to date. And I'm going to share with you the MBTA Communities overlay location options that we're going to be showing to the public tomorrow morning and on Wednesday evening. And so for this presentation, I'll be giving you kind of what I'll refer to as the play-by-play, if you will. And then Tad Carpenter, who's a member of the Planning Board and also a member of the working group, he'll be providing some additional context or, I guess, color commentary, if you want to think of it that way. So let's go to the first slide, Nancy.
Steve, there is a clicker there. I don't know if it works.
Oh.
Sometimes it works, so you can try it, see if it advances.
Okay. Which button?
The arrow left and right.
Left and right, okay. Oh,
It may not work. Sometimes it does.
okay.
I'm happy to just advance.
Where's the receiver? Is it over?
Right
see,
there.
To aim it there?
Up on the ceiling.
On the ceiling.
The ceiling.
Oh,
Oh, it's my machine.
All
That's
right.
your machine?
Just wave it around, Steve.
wait, yeah. That's what I'll do.
Just all advancements. Give me the-
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so for the state, so it just says state context, there should be more there. But I'll speak to it anyway. So for the state context, in August of 2019, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, they released a study of all things traffic congestion. And that study indicated that the Baker-Polito administration would work with the state legislature to advance legislation to address the report's recommendations. And among those recommendations in the report are the ones that you would see here if we could see the slide. One of them is continuing to pursue state-level policies encouraging cities and towns to produce more housing, and that municipalities served by the MBTA should consider changing their land use, zoning, housing, and transportation policies as needed to avoid limiting housing production or exacerbating existing congestion with further low-density, automobile-oriented housing and commercial development. So that was really, that really set this whole thing in motion. So from there, in January 2021, the Baker administration signed the MBTA Communities Act into law. And then from that legislation, an MBTA community shall have a zoning ordinance or bylaw that provides for at least one district of reasonable size in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right, and that the district or districts shall be located not more than a half mile from a commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, or bus station, if applicable. And so, Tag, I know this is something that, did you want to jump in here? No? Okay. So that's kind of one of the key terms. And it was determined that Duxbury, as an adjacent community, that it was applicable to us as well. In August of 2023, the Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, or EOHLC, they finalized their guidance that provided increased specificity regarding MBTA communities' obligations under the law. And then by December 31st of last year, the MBTA adjacent communities, of which Duxbury is one, we were required to have submitted our compliance plan to EOHLC for approval. This is the next slide here. So this is the Duxbury context. So for the Duxbury context, that law imposed a mandate for rapid housing expansion. That stands in contrast to Duxbury's longstanding goal of preserving the town's rural and historical character. But nevertheless, in response to that mandate, the MBTA Communities Working Group, we put forth our first proposal for compliance with the law. And that was a roughly 50-50 split between overlaying existing dense development and several contiguous greenfield parcels. And those greenfield parcels were chosen due to their relative ease of access to Route 3 and public transit via the MBTA commuter rail station in Kingston.
Steve, can you explain what greenfield means?
Oh, yes, thank you, Brian. Greenfield basically just refers to undeveloped land, so it would be covered with grass, trees, shrubs, just undeveloped.
It's green.
Yes, it's green. Yes.
Brown right now.
Or brown, yes. So next slide.
Brownfield means something totally different. Right?
Yes, great, thank you. And so then we all know what happened next. So a number of factors contributed to the resounding no vote that we had at the special town meeting last November. So a number of factors contributed to that at the time. The Supreme Judicial Court decision on the Milton case, that was still pending. We had received feedback from EOHLC on the day of special town meeting that there were technical issues with some of our density and use calculations. We had put a good bylaw together, but it could have been better. And there was opposition to the possibility of new large-scale development at the Greenfield location.
Strong opposition.
Yes, very strong. Next slide. So then that brings us to the current context. So as we know, the SJC, they issued their ruling on the Milton case in January of this year. They ruled that the MBTA Communities Law is valid and enforceable by the executive branch. And the SJC also ruled that the guidance that EOHLC had issued in had finalized in August of 2023 was invalid on procedural grounds, since they were not issued in compliance with the Administrative Procedures Act. However, EOHLC then rectified the matter almost immediately by issuing guidance as emergency regulations. And can we go to the next slide? So then we also have, so staying with the current context here, we also have the February 2025 opinion from the Division of Local Mandates in the State Auditor's Office. So I'll refer to them as the DLM. The DLM, they opined that the MBTA Communities Law is an unfunded mandate. But despite that, the MBTA Communities Law remains in force, and the opinion that DLM issued doesn't exempt Duxbury or other municipalities from their obligation to comply with the law. A number of cities and towns have filed complaints in Superior Court asking in order to temporarily or permanently exempt them from compliance with the law. And Duxbury is actually in the process of doing this ourselves. We go to the next slide. But again, as of now, no determinations have come from these complaints, and our obligation to comply with the law remains unchanged. So that being the case, the working group continues to honor the result of the November 2024 special town meeting, which will be addressing voter concerns and will prepare a proposition for town residents to vote on that if approved, a proposition that will comply with state law if it's approved. And next slide. So what does that look like right now? Well, it's your turn, and by your turn, we mean that it's the turn of the residents of Duxbury to provide input on their preferences among options that will allow us to arrive at a proposition for a special town meeting in June. And with the help of our consultant, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, or MAPC, we've come up with 3 zoning overlay options, each of which would allow Duxbury to comply with the district locations, size, and residential density requirements of the MBTA Communities Law. So I would note here that in MAPC's nomenclature, they refer to these options as directions. So for the sake of this discussion tonight, I'll use that nomenclature here. So all 3 of the directions, again, directions options, all 3 of the directions will include the Island Creek location as one of the sub-districts. And the first of the 3 options will be what we call the west direction, or direction A. That one will be the Island Creek. That will be Island Creek plus the village of Duxbury on Route 53. The second option will be what we call the central direction, or direction B. That will be the Island Creek location plus the Southscape condominium development on Lincoln Street. And the third option will be what we call the southern direction, or direction C, and that will be Island Creek plus portions of the Deacon's Path and Bay Farm developments. And can we go to the next slide? Okay, so again, we need the input from residents on this. The working group, we're going to be holding the outreach sessions in the coming days and weeks. They will all be at the Mary Room at the Duxbury Free Library. The first 2 are tomorrow morning from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. and on Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., that's this week, where the focus will be on the locations that I just described. And the next 2 will be on April 8th at 1 p.m. and April 9th at 6 p.m., where the focus will be on the bylaw amendment that will accompany the overlay district that's ultimately chosen. And can we go to the next slide? Okay, so the overlay map and the bylaw amendment must be finalized by April 24th. That's the key date that we're shooting at right now for the MBTA Communities Working Group. So for that, we have a request of the Planning Board. And that request is that the Planning Board review the final draft map and bylaw when they're prepared, review those by April 21st. And that will be the last opportunity to make changes for the map and bylaw amendment for special town meeting. And we have a request for the Select Board that they please review the finalized map and bylaw by April 28th. And you can think of this really as your first look at the proposition for town residents. And the next slide. Okay, so now again, we'll take a look at the 3 map options that we'll be showing residents tomorrow and on Wednesday this week. And again, there they are, directions A, B, and C. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so here's direction A. Oh, I keep going on here. Dad, did you have anything to add? Oh, my goodness. I wonder. I think he's humoring me. Anyway, so direction A. This is, right here, you can see the map of Duxbury. And then there are the 2 locations. You can see Island Creek down there, kind of in the middle lower. And then the village of Duxbury right there. This tells you kind of where the overlay locations are that we would be proposing for direction A. And then go to the next slide. Okay, and there it is. Okay, so the Island Creek location, if you look at that, that should look very familiar. That is essentially, for the most part, it is unchanged from what we had during what we had proposed at special town meeting in November. There was very little concern, very little opposition to that particular location. So again, we could think of that as an anchor. I would refer to it as an anchor location that again is going to be a part of all 3 of these options, or what we're calling directions. And then we have here, and you can see how many acres are there. It's 32.4 for Island Creek, and then for Village of Duxbury, it's 20.63. Remember that we need at least one of the districts to comprise 50% or more of the total district that we would be proposing here. If there's more than one, both of them combined must equal or exceed 50 total acres in acreage. And you can see here, when you add that up, that's a little bit over 50 acres. So that is direction number one. We go to the next one. Okay, so then here are the zoning characteristics. I won't tick through all of this, but this reflects a lot of what we have in the current draft of the bylaw with respect to the minimum lot size, setback, average lot coverage, building and parking percentage, parking spaces per unit. And then down at the bottom, you can see those numbers in red. Those are the really important ones here. So under direction A, or option A, that the density that we would have would be 16 units per acre at the Island Creek site, and there would be 17 units per acre at the Village at Duxbury site. Again, remember, these are all developed sites that we're talking about. So we're looking to overlay sites here that would minimize the possibility that these would be developed or redeveloped anytime in the near future.
Can I just ask a question? Or do you want him to keep going?
Because there's just two more, and then, because they all kind of interlock a little bit. So why don't you just finish, and then we'll have questions up
Yes,
there.
please. Okay, great. So this is just our compliance check here. And by the way, all of this will be available to everybody. This is public information. We'll have this out on the working group website. So you can see all the, with regard to the capacity. Again, we have to zone for a minimum of 750 units. What we've modeled here for direction A is 794. So that's a little bit over the 5% buffer that we had originally intended to hit. You can see that we don't have access to a station area here, so we obviously pass there. Gross density again has to be at least 15 units per acre. We pass there. 50 total acres. Again, we're just over that. We've got the minimum district area. Again, each of these areas has to be at least 5 acres, and of course, they well exceed that. And then the contingent threshold, again, one of them has to be over 50%, and Island Creek is 58 in this case, so they all pass. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is direction B, so this is the other option that we're going to have people look at and give us their feedback on. So this is what we call direction B, or the central version. Again, Island Creek, but then it also includes the Southscape condominiums, which is just off of Lincoln Street. You know where the roundabout is on Route 14. If you're I think folks should have a pretty good idea where this is. The roundabout would be just up. See what it says Southscape. It's kind of up where the word Southscape is there, and then you would come down to where that is. Again, Island Creek, slightly modified here. You can see we're cutting out some of the mixed use there out in the front. Because we didn't need all of that acreage, so we chose to reduce that. And then, so this is the Southscape location at 19.7 acres. Again, there's I believe 66 units in total at Southscape, so that would give you a sense of what the density is there. Next, we go to the next slide. So again, zoning characteristics very similar to what we saw before. Building height, Island Creek again is 4. Maximum building height at Southscape, if anything were to be developed, would be 3 stories. Density at Island Creek in this scenario would be 17 units per acre, and then at Southscape it would be 12 units per acre. Go to the next slide. Very similar here. We're modeling 788. That is exactly 5%, a 5% buffer over the minimum 750. And then everything else is, very similar. We pass all the compliance tests for direction B. Can we go to the next one? Okay, and then here's direction C. So again, Island Creek, and then we have 2 other sub-districts here. We're proposing an overlay of Deacon's Path and Bay Farm. So they're all right fairly close to each other. So here again, Island Creek, that's the same, essentially the same one that we had for direction B for Island Creek. We had carved out a little bit of the mixed use. And then you can see Bay Farm. That's not the entirety of the Bay Farm location. You can see you can't really, well, you can kind of see it. I'll point it out. There's an arm over here. You can see that going up there. That is part of the Bay Farm development. I have no idea why it was developed that way, but that was. We carved that off, and we just took the area that you see outlined in yellow. So that's a little over 8.6 acres there. for Bay Farm. And then over here, we have Deacon's Path. Deacon's Path, as you may know, is more or less right across the street from Island Creek. Island Creek is actually kind of right up here, maybe a little farther down.
Clustering
But-
it all
but
in
pretty
one
close.
area.
And so the Deacon's Path location, that's about a little over 14, it's about 14.4 acres. So if you add that all up, that will come to a little bit over 50 acres in total. Again, here's the chart. Looking down at the bottom, in this scenario, Island Creek would be 17 units per acre, Bay Farm would be 15, and then Deacon's Path would be 12 units per acre. Again, they all have to average to at least 15 units per acre, and so that's why some are higher than 15 and some are lower. And then here's the compliance check. Once again, all the metrics pass. So what that tells you for direction C, and then also for directions A and B, all three of these would be satisfactory from a compliance standpoint. And so that's why we feel comfortable presenting these to folks and presenting them as options where they can express their preferences of which ones they would prefer. And can we go to the next one? So does it comply? Again, here you have direction A. We're modeling 794 units for direction A. That's Island Creek and Village at Duxbury. 708, so that's a little over 5% buffer. Island Creek and Southscape, that's right, exactly 5% buffer for that district. And then 789, pretty much the same thing for Island Creek, Bay Farm, and Deacon's Path. And then you can see the model density, 16.1 overall for direction A, 16.2 for B, and then 15.3 for direction C. And I think that's it. Is there another? That's it. Okay. So that's what we're going to be showing people tomorrow and on Wednesday. Ted, did you have any? No? I don't know.
Amy.
I think he's holding back. I'd open it up for questions. Go ahead.
Amy first.
Cindy had questions too, but I'll go first. First of all, scenario B doesn't seem to have the requisite 50 acres.
Okay, let's go to, let's see. Can we pull that up? Okay.
B.
Yep, so we can-
Southscape and Island Creek
C.
combined are short.
Go
back one. Keep going back.
So we needed 50, and this adds, it should be adding up to 52.1.
Then if you look at the
But
can you go back to the
and
map?
we'll take a look at the map here. Yeah. Okay, so we got the
29 and
474,
19.
and then 19.7.
Is that 50? I don't think so.
Yeah, is that, I can't do math in my head. That's, 30, it's not quite 30.
Seems a little short to me.
That
And
does seem a little
I'm
short.
not good with math.
The numbers might be off there, but thank you, Amy. We will check that to be sure. If we need additional acreage, we can add, you can see how we cut this out right here, this section out of Island Creek. This was actually included in direction A. If we do need additional acreage, we would be able to add that back, and that would take us.
I'm just pointing, it is short, yes.
Yeah.
I think,
Okay.
even
So-
and I'm terrible with math, I knew that was short. So then
We'll check the numbers, though.
my second question is just, how this would work. I'm always worst case scenario. So, you're suggesting, that these may not ever be built out. However, you're creating an overlay zoning that by right allows for the density that is being zoned. So if we just talk about, can you explain to me for Southscape, for instance? So that's a condominium. I'm sure they have a homeowners association, so they don't own the underlying land, they own their units. So what would be the scenario in which this could be built out? The homeowners association all agrees that to sell, what would that actually entail? How could it happen?
That's a very good question. I think what you're pointing to, because you do have all the condominium owners there, that would add to the complexity that a developer would face if a developer was interested in redeveloping the existing improvements that are there. So I think that further would reduce the possibility that there would be a significant redevelopment here at the Southscape site, at least anytime in the near future.
Okay, so, yeah, I think you have to, when the public is thinking about this, you have to kind of play out the scenarios of each one to that extent. You know, the village, I wonder if you were to do that in an overlay, you're then allowing by right a significant increase to their density. So that's a parcel that's all owned by one owner. So they could perhaps add to what's already there in a significant way. So the impediments that would be in front of Southscape may not be there for a village or Island Creek, because those are one ownership.
Yeah, yes, that's right. And some of the additional information that we're putting together now will look at things like when was each of these developments constructed. That would give us a rough idea of what the remaining estimated useful life might be, and you'd be able to figure out or be able to estimate roughly when you might expect to see a redevelopment there, just based on that. And then, oh yes, please, sure.
Nancy, could you put up the slide for A for the village? In terms of the village of Duxbury specifically, because I have some direct experience with that I'd like to share with you.
I'm sorry, which one?
I think it's A, village?
That's it.
Yeah. So, first of all, Ted Carpenter, Summer Street, right up the street from here. And you'll note on the parcel outline here, this is not the parcel. The parcel actually extends all the way out here. This is also village at Duxbury land, and that green space land was excluded from this overlay. So what
Can you
have-
stay at the microphone so the
Yep,
folks at home can hear you? Thank
So
you.
what-
You can take it out. You can take it out of
What
the
you
holder.
have is there's a treat area around the driveway and a little bit of green field at the street frontage. So that could potentially be infill development. But the village itself has over 170 units. So the existing density is actually much higher than the overlay zoning density. And in terms of the propensity for development, of course, it's up to the private owner. But from what I've learned about this operation, it's part of a pretty large corporation, and it's the crown jewel. This is a premier facility. It's in excellent shape. Just having been there and seen it, there's extremely low probability that would be replaced. And even if it were replaced under the zoning, it couldn't be as dense as it is now. So there's really zero, from my perspective, zero risk of that here.
I do hear that the folks that live there love being village people, so.
Cindy?
Yeah, I guess my question as you were going through is what, we can stay with that one. What is the maximum units per acre now, for instance, like at Island Creek? I mean, what you want is 16 units per acre, is what you're saying.
What do you
We have to hit a minimum of 15 units per
Right,
acre.
what is it now?
At Island Creek?
Yeah.
We have that number. It's below 15, but it's not that far below. It's on the order of about 12. Yeah, I think it's about 12 units per acre right now at Island Creek. They have 358 units there, and then so we can run that across the 32. There's actually we're overlaying a little bit more than Island Creek itself here with the Island Creek overlay, but that would give you a rough idea what the density is there.
Okay.
But
And then, go ahead, I'm
nope,
sorry.
after you.
Then the village, I think what I heard Tag just say is that the units per acre there are much higher.
Yes. So in effect, if we were to overlay the village of Duxbury at the density we're looking to apply, there would really be no advantage or no opportunity to develop under the overlay at a density greater than what currently exists.
So
I'm just, sorry, because Mike had it. Go ahead, Mike, and then Fernando.
I just want to dovetail off of Cindy's point. I think it would be helpful for the public at these meetings. I think you had it in the last year's presentations about the net number of units that would be created by, even if it's improbable by these overlay districts, like what's in there currently, what is being proposed, and what the net would be. I know we put that last time. It was more significant when we were talking about more green space, but some of these have some green space. So I think people would want to know what the difference is.
The net new units that would be possible here.
Yeah.
We could certainly do that. I will say that given that everything is dense here, or there is existing density, it will be lower than what we had proposed in November, but we'll certainly look at that number. Yep.
And then I have 3 kind of quick points, but just learning our lessons from the last time. One, the bylaw going to council. I hope there's a strategy as opposed to get that to council early so that they can make any edits and change and work with the consultants on maps and things so we don't have technical errors at town meeting. And to that point, is there a timeline as far as when this will be submitted to EOHLC so that they can do a pre-approval and not give us an 11th hour? Because I know that's probably was a concern of them, or a reason why we got an 11th hour response.
Yes, so again, April 24th is the date by which we have to have the map and the bylaw finalized.
Oh, so that's to them, not us.
That's when it needs to be, it would need to be finalized for, but yes, but it would be shortly thereafter. I would anticipate that we would be able to submit both to EOHLC for a pre-review.
Okay, and I understand you'd probably put language in about the affordability component here. But
Yes.
I'm going to repeat my concern about where the Affordable Housing Trust is with the idea of pursuing this 20% and the economic feasibility study, so that could be a component of this. And I just have not heard, and we are running out of time here. So
Yes.
I would like to know I would like to hear from them. I don't know if we have to put them on an agenda.
Actually, I had a conversation with Rebecca about that, and she had told me that doing a fiscal impact analysis, is that what you're looking for?
I think it's an economic.
It's an economic
Two different things.
impact.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so Mike, I think what you're talking about is an economic feasibility
Yep.
analysis that we would need in place
For the
to
20%.
go above the 10%,
Right.
maximum that we'd be able to build in without a
Yeah.
study. But then, I think, there's the fiscal impact analysis that would take a look at what kind of an impact this would have on the town's finances if developments were to happen under the scenario that we wind up
And I think
taking.
she's told you that it's impossible to do that because you don't know what's coming in.
Right.
That's correct, yes.
So I'm
That's
talking
For the
about
fiscal impact analysis.
So
that's
I'm
right.
talking about the economic feasibility study that was a prerequisite to getting to 20%.
Yes. And so for that, what we've done is we've included in the bylaw, or we will have included in the bylaw, and we did this the last time as well. There's language in there that says that if in the future, if after the bylaw is passed, if in the future there's an economic feasibility study that would allow us to increase the affordability threshold at the within these districts above 10%, that we would be able to do that, provided that it was supported by the study, and then B, approved also by EOHLC.
Yeah, I think that's, to answer your question, Mike, I think the Affordable Housing Trust was hesitant to invest money, not knowing whether the MBTA bylaw would pass.
Well, I
Right,
think it would
so-
assist
so-
in the passage of it, so.
That's right. But the idea being
Yep.
that there would be language in there that we anticipate
Yep.
the preparation of that study, and if
Yep.
it was supportive, that we'd be able to increase it
Yeah.
above 10, so.
So, coming on to that point, if the density is already higher than required, then does that mean that there's no need to build more stuff in there because you already reached the target, or is that what that means?
So, I mean, there's no need to build anything, just to mention that. But
Right.
looking at the village, the density there
Yes.
is higher than the density that we would be imposing with this overlay, such that they would not be able to develop under the bylaw that we'd be passing, they would not be able to develop anything to a greater density than what's there already.
Right.
And that's
Yeah, so in
still,
other words, then, if I understand this right, then there's no longer they can't come in there because we've already reached the target and therefore no more development can occur in there. Is that what you're saying?
Not under the bylaw that we would pass, that's right.
All
So
right.
right now, currently, it was a special permit that was
Right.
provided to them. So it would, and special permits can always be amended. And so theoretically, today, they could come in and amend their special permit to do something different or add to that. So this would be more restrictive,
restricted.
but I think, again, it sounds like they're a profitable crown jewel, I think you said, and I
So basically.
can't imagine that they're
Stops
going to
the
want to change that model, so.
But the point is that it stops further development, so therefore the village is as the village.
This would have, under that scenario, the overlay that we would impose would have just about no effect on future development.
So
So just a couple of things.
sounds like a pretty, sorry. Why are we looking at the other areas then?
Well, we've learned our lesson, Fernando.
Oh, sorry.
And, yeah.
Right.
Giving options for now.
Okay, options, sorry. But that's critical, right? Anyway.
I think it'll be an important consideration.
It's called compliance with the letter of the law.
There you go.
Minimal compliance is the term we're using.
That's a good segue, because one of the things that we wanted to point out, we as the MBTA Communities Working Group, is that there are multiple ways to achieve compliance. These are just three that have been modeled. And Steve, maybe you can speak a little bit about why these locations were chosen, because obviously I'm sure we'll get questions tomorrow and Wednesday about, well, why not this other place or this other, there'll be other suggestions, which are fine. But can you explain a little bit about why these were focused on specifically, given that the town now, A, has an obligation to comply? So last time, the SJC hadn't ruled. They've since ruled towns don't have an option, because there was a question saying, well, we could maybe opt out and just lose grants. Now the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts says, well, you don't have that option. You must comply, which changes our decision-making, right? We can't, well, we could supposedly say no, but we just said no to an override and need every grant that we can possibly get. So we're trying to frame up a scenario that's palatable to the town, that will pass muster with the state, that will allow those grants to keep coming. That's the underlying goal here. Not that we necessarily want anything built anywhere. But with that said, just explain a little bit about how we chose these sites.
Sure. So I guess to do that, I would just lead in with what we had proposed for the November special town meeting. And again, we had proposed a greenfield site. We referred to that as the Bonji site. It was very likely, there was just about nothing there. There was some residual, turkey coops and some other infrastructure there that were of minimal value. That basically could have been developed by right at the density that we were proposing here. But the contrast is here, everything that we're proposing already has existing density on it. So the idea is that the possibility of large-scale development going on at any of the sites that we're looking at here, the possibility of that happening is far less than it would have been under the scenario that we had looked at last November. So that was really, and pursuing the minimal compliance objective here. And again, minimizing the possibility of large-scale development or redevelopment of these sites informed the options that we've looked at tonight.
And the point being, there aren't many locations to choose from
That's
that
right.
are densely developed, that meet the underlying criteria in terms of continuity, the size, density, all that stuff. So we're kind of put together almost the universe of things that could pass muster as currently built.
There really aren't many better options than these from the perspective of pursuing a minimal compliance strategy.
Okay. Any other questions from the board before I go to the planning board?
No, thank you.
All right. Planning board, anything else to add, Kristen? No? Okay. How about
Let me actually-
MBTA?
Kristen,
Oh.
yep.
Oh, nothing, I was just gonna say, no,
Oh.
Steve, thanks so much, that was a great presentation.
Got a lot of help from a lot of different people.
So any members of the planning board now putting on your MBTA Communities Working Group hat? Now do you have a comment? No, if there's nothing, that's fine. And then I'll go to Public Betsy.
I just wanted to mention, kind of under the Captain Obvious hat, this does not do anything to provide additional revenue to the town, which is something that we are acutely aware of, and it does nothing to provide affordable components to any seniors in town. So, yes, it is a minimally invasive, and I respect the fact that these folks have worked harder than anybody should have to, and have done a magnificent job, but we continue to espouse that we would like to find affordable options for our seniors to stay in town. This does not do any of that. My mother lived there for many years, and my mother-in-law, so I'm very aware of what it costs to stay at the village, and it was not cheap at all. And it also doesn't provide any additional revenue. In fact, as you well know, we've had many conversations with this particular site about what is the taxable component, since they're a co-op, not a condominium. It's more of an atypical ownership situation for Duxbury.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to just be mindful of that, especially in light of what we've been working with as far as revenue and the override, and where is the money going to come from for us to support all the programs and everything that everybody needs. And, once again, we are choosing a route that does not coexist with gaining additional revenue and/or affordable housing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Betsy. Just one point, and then I wanted to go back to Kristen for a second. Kristen, at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned 4 legs to the stool. I think I heard one of them, or to the table, rather. One of them is addressing the issues that Betsy just raised now, but I think you said on Duxbury's timeline, or something along those lines. Can you repeat that?
Sure, we would like to take a 2-pronged approach. The first is that we would like to work toward the minimal impact compliance, and the second one is that we would like to address the issue of multifamily zoning at a later date on Duxbury's timeline and in Duxbury's terms. So Betsy, we are in complete agreement with you, and when I mentioned earlier that we have some priorities and goals, that's actually one of the working on addressing the housing concerns in the comprehensive plan is definitely on that list.
All right, thanks. Fernando.
I mean, that's just building on that point, right? So we have a deadline we've got to work through. That question, Betsy, is we need to address it, but that will take a lot of conversation, a lot of engagement, and a lot of feedback, and we don't have the time to do that before being in compliance, right? So
hold on just a second, Amy.
Yep.
I completely agree about the affordable component. I heard that one of the plans from a town was rejected because they were putting forward 25% affordable, which really flies in the face of this. And I think that we should be at the maximum allowed with anything that we zone for, just to have it there. It should have at least 20%. So that too. And just on the whole housing, to build housing to generate revenue is, that is a very tough concept unless you're building condos, which tend to have a positive gain towards revenue, or back in the day when you could do restricted senior housing. You can't do that anymore, is my understanding. So housing to generate revenue it's very difficult if possible. So I'll be interested to hear what the planning board is suggesting for some future housing projects, but there's no easy answers when it comes to that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may, in terms of the affordability component, I'll note that one of the priorities on the planning board for this year is to also address inclusionary zoning rules. And one of the primary recommendations of revisiting inclusionary zoning rules is to perform an economic feasibility analysis of your affordability threshold. So this work that we've asked the Affordable Housing Trust to fund for the MBTA communities law will also be needed for the work of the planning board going forward. So I'm certain that that will be done. The timing, may depend on some other things, but it needs to be done, and it's one of the recommendations that it actually be redone fairly regularly, because the real estate market changes, the housing, production costs change, and therefore that point of feasibility of how much affordability can you mandate is a moving target. So it's got to be recalibrated for this and for any other purpose. I think in terms of your point about the revenue from growth, this is a hot button issue and the biggest point of debate. Is it actually true that building houses supports a sustainable budget? And the best answer I can get is that in the short term, yes, and in the long term, no.
Right.
It helps when the housing is built, and then after a while, it turns into a liability again. So you can't build your way out of a structural deficit. We have to restructure the finances of the town in a permanent way, so it doesn't matter whether housing is built or not.
All right.
I know. It's a
I know they don't-
whole-
it's true.
Okay. And finally, I just want to say, in terms of the challenge of producing multifamily or affordable or accessible, or I like to call it opportunity housing, something that's at a lower price point, more available. One of the things that we'll be doing next, after we get through the mapping exercise, is the bylaw language. And as we have been going through a second round here on the bylaw language, we're identifying some new approaches for Duxbury. These are established approaches that are accepted elsewhere in the world, but they're housing styles or housing standards that may allow for the production of lower cost, more modest structures. So I see that as part of the avenue. You can think of this MBTA community zoning as a sort of a laboratory for, what can we do, what will be acceptable to Duxbury as a standard that we can embrace to produce housing that's more aligned with what some of our residents need, as opposed to kind of what we see, market, quote unquote, market demand creating in the town. So
Appreciate that, Tag. Was there anything else from the public? I just want to keep this moving along, because I want to poll, well, not poll, but inquire of our members here again. This is on a real fast track, given the time constraints that the town is under to comply. And this is, I know this is the first time you're seeing it as a whole, and I'd be curious whether members of the Select Board have more feedback for the MBTA Communities Working Group that we can take into consideration as we move forward, because I think the opportunities to change things substantively as we move along towards June are going to be more limited. So this is kind of a good time to provide feedback to the extent we haven't done so already.
Okay.
Anything else from?
No, just a kind of a housekeeping question. I know that we had talked, you have a new member, and I know that you were looking for one other new member. Are we going to be voting on another new member for you guys? Do you have enough membership?
We have another candidate who has submitted a talent bank form, so we'll be going through the process to review and interview and advance that.
Good, great.
And the working group meets every Thursday, if you care to attend. And to reiterate, we have public open sessions tomorrow and Wednesday.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. Great, thank you. Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right,
Appreciate it,
so
Steve.
we'll move on now to discussion and review of Select Board goals.
Seems like a big discussion.
Yeah.
We're not setting our goals for the
Yeah,
upcoming year.
can someone tee
right?
this off? What are we doing?
We are setting our goals? I'm not, can we?
Yeah, no, we're
I
gonna take
haven't
this off.
really
Alright.
wrapped my head. There's been a lot going on, and I think,
We'll move it. The only thing I wanted to add to this, as we were talking tonight, is with all the discussion we had about water rates, I think it's important for us to put a bookmark somewhere that we revisit this in the fall, so we have a sense as to what the rates have done.
Revisit what in the fall?
To look at the data, to see what the rates have done in terms of consumption.
Sure. I think Jeannie may have a comment on the, did you want to talk about the goal setting though?
Yeah.
Because it's the kickoff to the evaluation process, I believe.
For the what process?
Evaluation.
Evaluation.
Oh, all right,
I
yeah.
heard inauguration, I'm
That's fine.
sorry.
Right.
Go ahead,
So
Jeannie.
you may recall last year, we entered into a new process for the performance evaluation of the town manager.
Yep.
And this is an integral part of that process. So we agreed last year that it would be an annual practice that every time the select board returned from the election and there was a reorganization of the board, that we would have a select board goal setting opportunity. Tomorrow we launch the performance evaluation process, and there definitely is a lot going on. And I hesitate to even launch it given what's going on, but it's really important that we keep our process going. And now more than ever, it's even more important to have goals that everyone can use to row in the same direction through the process.
Can I make a suggestion?
Please.
All right. I've printed out Rennie's the proposed select board goals for 2024. So I think we'll be discussing those as part of the performance evaluation. But maybe suggest one goal that maybe we can have a conversation around is that we need to embark on the budget process a little differently. I think it's quite clear in that as a select board, we'd like to become more involved in setting and involved in developing the goals and objectives for the budget. If you look at the Town Manager Act, if you look at item number I, it says that the Board of Selectmen shall review the annual proposed budget submitted by the Town Manager and make recommendations with respect thereto as they deem advisable. Town Manager shall present the budget incorporating the recommendations of the Selectmen to the Finance Committee and the Fiscal Advisory Committee. I think, maybe looking back, the process is that we come into it a bit late. Once the Select Board, once the Finance Committee has worked their way through it and come up with their recommendations. And we sometimes participate in those conversations, or sometimes we don't. In the normal budget process, right? We did this year with the override. We did sit sit down and discuss the override, but we never actually sat down and got ourselves involved in the actual the balanced budget. So I think there's maybe a goal for the select board, and combined with the town manager, is let's look at our budget process and see what we can do to update it, to reflect the need, I think, for the select board to actually kind of maybe better own the budget itself before it goes out and gets reviewed by the Finance Committee and the Fiscal Advisory Committee. I think just it'll be an improvement, I think, in the way we do it. So at the end that we own it, right? That it's basically we feel that we've had the opportunity to discuss it and agree with it.
Before we get in, I hear you on that. Before we get into the guts of what the goals would be, just in terms of the framework, and Rainey or Jeannie, do we have the existing goals that we would be
Fernando
looking
has
to
them.
modify?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Oh, all right. So do we not all have a copy of this?
No, we do not.
Okay. Shouldn't we?
We should.
Okay.
I printed it out. It was yeah.
Okay. Well, what's your pleasure tonight?
I have a
Seems like
question.
We had
Is
more
there,
time.
have an opportunity to review this.
is there,
I don't know why we're doing this.
is there a reason we can't do this next week?
We
I
need,
mean,
we
it's
need-
late,
we need
first
some
of all.
time.
It's late.
Is there a reason, Jeannie?
So we may be able to change the timeline. As I said, the performance evaluations launch tomorrow. And then individuals have until April 4th to complete their self-evaluations and return those to their supervisors. So there's a pretty significant timeline that's involved in this, and the sooner people have the goals, the easier it is for them to create their own. 'cause
So
it
that'll
all
give the
kind of-
employees a week
Yeah.
Well,
for this employee.
I understood, and shame on me, I guess, I understood this agenda item to be more of like the smorgasbord type agenda item, future agenda items rather than the actual goal setting. So, and especially where we didn't have, at least handy, the 2024 goals. it would be my preference, and I defer to you, that we put this until next week, make sure we all get a copy of the goals, and then evaluate how, if at all, we should change those for
Okay.
the upcoming year.
Yeah.
Agreed.
On the 4th, is that, for instance, in this case, Rainey would be evaluating his performance in the past year, which would have nothing to do with the goals that we're setting for next year. Is that what I'm hearing, or I'm not
So
understanding
the
it?
goals that you set last
Yeah.
year are what he used for the current performance evaluation
Yeah.
cycle.
Right.
So that will factor into his self-evaluation in terms
Yeah.
of how he did retrospectively.
Right, but the goals that we set tonight or next Monday have nothing to do with that.
They
I
will,
think as
right?
part of Rainey's self-evaluation, he sets his goals, and his goals flow from your goals.
Right.
But
Sure.
given, what's happened, we can reconfigure the schedule, and we can back everything,
Back it up a
Jeannie,
week
we
or something.
agreed to this process, right? And I think we just need to refresh our memories. Can you please, following this conversation, send out to the select board the process that
Yep.
that Brian and I worked on and presented to the select board as to how this would work in the future? Maybe a good
Yep.
aid memoir
Yep.
would be to send that back out again, such that we
Yep.
can get, read it through and get up to speed again.
I'll do that tomorrow.
There's been, like I said, there's been a lot going on, and then maybe
And one of the
we need a
things that,
refresher.
in that process
Yeah.
that was discussed after the fact, when we went over the evaluations, was that what was happening was that they were getting compiled and then put together and then listed for the public. And we had agreed last year that it is better to keep the comments with the individual board members, that there was.
So not to have them.
Not to have them-
aggregated. I'm not sure that the board voted on that. I know that was a comment that was made, but I'm not sure that there was
Yeah.
a vote
That's correct.
on that. I know that I did receive that feedback, but I'm not aware that it was a decision made by
I'd
the
like to
entire
vote
board.
on that. I think that it's important for the evaluations, if a member of the public wants to see how one person evaluated the town manager, it should be public record, I think. I
All the
mean, we have
comments
to
are-
discuss it in public, and I'm told it's a public process. We can't discuss it in any place else, so it just seems that you should own your comments. That's my thought. I don't understand the benefit of compiling all the comments and making them anonymous. It just seems less transparent to me.
Is the actual, you want the name of the select board person attached to each comment? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, that's how I thought it was done before, and then all of a sudden it was being,
No,
I don't understand why it wouldn't be that way.
We'll have to
Anybody
look
have
at our notes from last year, and we'll take a look.
Right.
All right, so we'll put this on as part of next week's discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it'd be good to send out that,
Yes, I'll do that tomorrow.
great, thank you, Jeannie.
Along with the 2024 goals.
Yeah.
All right.
Great.
Betsy?
I just, to piggyback on Fernando and understanding, we would obviously welcome cooperation with the select board on the developing the budget. But just to be clear, our timeline is very different from yours. And we have to get our work started in September and October and do our deliberations. So it may not always coincide. It would be meaning no disrespect, but we're not going to, if you're voting and you're having discussions in January, we've already moved on to the articles. So we'll have to work on coordinating that.
Oh, yeah.
So that, because our vote doesn't have to match yours. And I think it's sometimes very healthy for the finance committee and the select board to have, different points of view. We're different organizations and have different lenses, but obviously would welcome any additional cooperation. But timeline is important. We can't wait till you all come to your conclusion before we start voting on ours, because we just don't have enough time before town
Yeah,
meeting.
and
And you and I have had that
We
conversation.
had that conversation. We just need to find a way.
I just wanted the rest of the
Yeah.
board to hear.
No, I respect that, Betsy. We just need to find a way to, the town manager shall present the budget incorporating the recommendations of the selectmen to the finance committee and the fiscal advisory committee. This is what's stated in the Town Manager Act that was signed by the legislator, incorporated in this town. We just need to find a way to ensure that
Yes,
we do
absolutely,
this.
but it doesn't keep us from doing our work.
No, we got to find a.
We will be doing that and meeting with our department heads and whatever, and always be
Yep.
available if you have questions.
Yep.
Great,
Yep,
thank
agreed.
you. All right, so we're going to kick this until next week. Why don't we move on to declaration of surplus items, facilities?
Can I see that goal? I just want to see what
Yeah.
Do you want the chairs? Do you want to keep these chairs? The surplus?
Oh, I know, the chairs, actually, the surplus chairs are
these
better
chairs.
looking than these.
Is anybody presenting this?
Did you see these chairs? Well, Jake should get the chair.
Okay, it was just,
Do you want me to read this out, or? The Facilities Director, Katie St. Clair, is requesting the Select Board declares as surplus the following items as they are no longer needed. 13 armchairs. These chairs were from the old senior center, and they were moved to Tarkland, and they are no longer used. All department heads have been asked if they could be useful. 19 wooden folding chairs. They've been stored in the Tarkland building for many years, and they are no longer used. Sounds like a bit of housekeeping, cleaning the garage, so to speak.
Those old wooden folding chairs are
Very
kind of
comfortable.
cool.
I might go
They're-
grab 'em.
They're very cool, and these chairs, these armchairs are better looking than the ones that we're sitting in.
true.
It's true.
They're probably more comfortable, I could probably
They're very
sit back
comfortable.
and
Hopefully
put
they
my
can
feet on
get
the
some money
ground.
for them, because
Yep.
they all seem very.
All right.
So,
Are you-
I think we all saw photos,
Yep.
and any discussion?
No.
I move that the Select Board declare as surplus the following: 13 armchairs and 19 wooden folding chairs, in order to allow these items to be disposed of, sold, auctioned, or donated, all in accordance with Mass General Law, Section 30B, and the town's rules and regulations, with proceeds to go to the general fund.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You guys have it. Motion carries. Town managers report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, the ballot question for the proposed override did not pass on Saturday by a very narrow margin of less than 5%. First, I'd like to thank the more than 4,100 folks who came out to vote. As you can see by the narrow margin, every vote does count. Second, I'd like to say that the override was intended to provide sustainability for the next several years, while the town decides on structural changes to services, aesthetics, and more. However, in the absence of an override, the impacts will be felt immediately and will last for several years. We've already started to receive resignations and anticipate that there will be more. With that, the 5A budget that was approved at the annual town meeting will be the operating budget used for FY26. Without further direction from the Select Board, this is the budget that stands. We will begin working on the FY27 budget in the coming weeks. Before that process begins, we will add it to a future agenda to have a conversation about this board's budgetary goals and priorities.
What do you mean, Rainey, by without,
Further direction of the Select Board.
If you wanted to do something different.
so if we wanted to take that 5A budget and rework it, we could? I mean, is that what that's saying? I'm just
Yes,
trying
it
to
is.
figure out what.
It is saying that.
In the warrant.
In the warrant, through a town meeting. You'd have to go back to town meeting to do it.
So we could do it
You'd
at a
have to have,
special.
you could have an article in a special town meeting and go back and do that.
The only thing you got to be careful of, right? The only
I'm
special.
just, I'm not saying I want to do it, I'm just,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No,
No,
I
no.
appreciate this.
Oh, no, no, it's, you making a comment, let's just,
Yeah, it's not on the
it's
agenda.
not on the agenda, yeah.
You could also have
Yeah.
an article at a future town meeting to do a smaller override if you wanted to.
And when is there a special, the MBTA is anticipating a potential special when?
June 16th.
But the idea would be if we get an injunction from the Superior Court in the meantime, we wouldn't need it.
Right,
Okay.
correct.
But parallel tracks.
Okay. Anything else?
But it's something that we could do.
But we just need to
We're
think
not-
of the
yeah, we're-
implications of that, right? So,
Yeah, it's also not on the agenda tonight, I think.
No, but I'm just
No, but it is
asking
my
for
report.
clarity.
It is my
I'm just
report.
asking for
can we
clarity.
discuss it
It
then?
will be,
or-
it will be on a future, the discussion for
I think
the
we are
FY,
okay discussing it. 'cause
the
we've
FY
already-
'27 budget will be on a future discussion.
Oh, yeah,
Will be
yeah.
On a future agenda, yes.
Well, I think that this,
Oh,
Do we want to put this on the agenda for next week?
We can add a specific agenda item for next week about fiscal '26 budget, if we need to have a discussion on it at all. We don't have to have a discussion, but I'd rather have an agenda item that we can
let's do that.
use or.
Because I
ask
just
for.
want to know what all the options are.
Well-
You know, I mean,
That's very fair.
and if during that meeting, we could have, I know that there was a concern that we were going to need to lay off public safety. And I would be interested, because I've heard,
Let me tell you right now.
okay.
With
perfect.
respect to the layoffs, there were 2 proposed layoffs in the fire department. However, they won't have to be laid off because we have 2 retirements. In the police department, there were going to be 2 layoffs, but we've had a retirement and a resignation. In the DPW, there were going to be 4, the DPW labor side, the union side, there were going to be 4 layoffs. However, there are 4 vacancies there. In terms of the actual RIFs, the reduction in force, it will be in the finance department, it will be the assistant town accountant. In the assessor's office, it will be the administrative assistant. In the DPW office, it will be the DPW office manager. Municipal services will be the administrative assistant for the Board of Health and the ZBA. And in the select board's office, it will be the administrative assistant. So there are actually 5 people that will be laid off as of June 30th. The others are all vacancies due to either retirements or resignations. Or vacancies, those 3
So
factors.
no layoffs in public safety, but the police, fire, and DPW because of some.
Of resignations,
and
vacancies, or retirements.
Okay,
but
thank you.
it's still a reduction of force.
That's right. They are not being backfilled. Those
Right.
positions
I
will
mean,
not be filled. So
correct.
there is a
Somebody
reduction.
retires, you don't
Correct.
hire somebody
As a
in their
result, we'll
place,
have
so
to-
it's not like,
Change the
No,
way
I
we
know.
do business.
All right, but we can discuss this next week. All right. Anything else in the town manager's report?
That was it.
All right, thank you. Announcements, please. If any. Is
Clerk?
there any?
Mr.
bonus-
Clerk?
I'm just,
He
I'm just-
forgets.
Shellfish?
I'm just struggling with what we just discussed.
Yeah.
Because what we said, you've got to be careful here, right? Where it means if we want to do this, we've got to fire somebody else. And I mean, so we're creating uncertainty in our organization right now as we speak.
That's
You've got
why
to be
we should
really
talk about it next
careful.
But I think the agenda item is just to talk about it at all, even if,
I don't
just to
understand
dismiss
what
it.
saying.
No, I don't know.
So we'll move it to next
Okay,
week, so we don't
right.
run afoul of any
Yeah,
open
okay.
meeting regulations.
All right, yep, I'll shut up. Announcements.
Thank you.
Recreational shellfish license applications are available on the town's website under online payments. The current season expires 3/31/2025. Commercial shellfish license applications. Commercial shellfish license applications will be available April 1st in the Select Board's office in Old Town Hall. You can apply only during the month of April, and the applicants must be a Duxbury resident and have a Massachusetts commercial fisherman's permit showing endorsed shellfish. For more information, please contact the Select Board's office at 781-934-1100, extension 5402. 2025 dog licenses are available. Reminder, all dogs over the age of 6 months must be licensed annually. There will be a late fee in the amount of $25 assessed for each unlicensed dog as of April 1st. 2025 beach and transfer station stickers. New 2025 beach and transfer stickers, effective April 1st, 2025, March 31st, 2026, are available to purchase. Stickers can be purchased online by visiting www.town.duxbury.ma.us and clicking the link to purchase under the Services tab on the home page, by calling City Hall Systems at 508-381-5455, or by mailing in or dropping off an application and supporting documents to Sticker Department, Duxbury Town Hall, 878 Tremont Street, Duxbury, MA 02332. Applicants are available on the town website and inside lobby of the town hall for your convenience. If you are dropping off an application, please drop off in black secure lockbox behind Town Hall with self-addressed stamped envelope. Additional information regarding sales and current services can be located on the homepage of the town's website, www.town.duxbury.ma.us. Stickers can also be purchased in person at Town Hall during normal business hours. Next scheduled Select Board's meeting will be on Monday, March 31st, 2025 at 6:30 p.m.
Well done.
Hey.
Thank you. Thanks again, Mike, for your service as chair. Great job.
Thanks, Buck.
Excellent year. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?